We're taught that blood is thicker than water, that family stands by you when the world turns its back, that your own flesh and blood will catch you when you fall. But when you're standing in your childhood living room with your father's hand still burning across your cheek, and your mother's eyes looking through you like you're already a ghost, you discover something far more shattering, that the people who gave you life can unmake you with a single word. Worthless. And the cruelest part? You'll spend years wondering if they were right. I learned this truth on a Tuesday afternoon, when I said 2 words that detonated my entire existence. I'm pregnant. My father's hand cracked across my face. My mother's hand stilled in her bread dough. My sister Vivienne looked at me with pity, which somehow hurt worse than our father's rage. "Get rid of it," my father commanded. No. That single word cost me everything. My name, my home, my pack. By sunrise, I was disowned, erased from the family like I'd never existed. Because I was already broken, you see, already the disappointment. The daughter whose wolf was so weak she barely registered on pack bonds. The one who couldn't shift properly. The mistake they'd tolerated for 23 years. And now I carried a child with no father, no name, no future. I didn't know it yet, but the male who'd touched me like I was precious, who'd disappeared into the night he was about to upend every certainty I'd ever known. This is the story of how I lost everything and discovered what I was truly worth. Chapter 1. Sanctuary and Secrets. The homeless shelter in the human district smelled like industrial disinfectant and desperation. I'd been there 3 weeks when the nausea started in earnest, not just morning sickness, but the kind of soul-deep exhaustion that made every breath feel like lifting stones. My wolf, already weak, had gone almost completely silent. I could barely feel her anymore, just a faint flutter in my chest, like a dying heartbeat. The other women in the shelter gave me a wide berth. Humans couldn't consciously recognize what I was, but some instinct told them I was other, different, wrong. They weren't entirely incorrect. I spent my days at the public library, the only place that felt safe, surrounded by books and silence. The head librarian, Mrs. Bonita, was human and kind in that brisk, no-nonsense way that didn't ask questions. She let me stay past closing sometimes, reading in the back corner where the heating vent kept me warm. It was there, surrounded by fairy tales and folklore, that I felt the first real flutter of movement. 13 weeks pregnant. Still barely showing, my baggy clothes hiding the small swell. But the baby moved, and for the first time since my father's hand connected with my face, I felt something other than shame, hope, tentative and terrifying, but there. "You're here late again." I looked up to find Mrs. Bonita standing at the end of the aisle, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She was maybe 60, with silver-threaded hair and eyes that saw too much. "Sorry," I said automatically, already gathering my things. "I'll go." I didn't say leave. She sat down across from me, groaning slightly as her knees protested. "I said you're here late. Again, which tells me you don't have anywhere better to be." My throat tightened. I'd gotten good at not crying over the past 3 weeks. Tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. "I have a studio apartment above the library," Mrs. Bonita continued, her voice matter-of-fact. "My daughter moved out years ago. It's small, but it's warm, and it's empty. If you're interested in earning your keep, helping with inventory, shelving, opening duties, it's yours." I stared at her. Why? Because I was 19 once, and pregnant, and everyone I knew told me I'd ruined my life. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her slacks. They were wrong. Life just changed shape. "Come on. I'll show you the space." The apartment was tiny, a single room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, and a window that overlooked the street. But it had a bed with clean sheets and a door that locked from the inside. I cried then, couldn't help it. 3 weeks of holding myself together cracked open in that small, safe space. Mrs. Bonita handed me tissues and didn't comment on my tears. "Rent is helping with the library. No money needed. And, Kenna?" She waited until I looked at her. "Whatever you're running from, it's not my business. But you're safe here. Understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good. There's soup in the fridge downstairs. Heat it up before bed." She moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The free clinic on Maple Street has a doctor who doesn't ask questions. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. Tell her I sent you. She'll make sure you and the baby are healthy." After she left, I stood in the middle of my new home. What a strange word, and pressed both hands to my stomach. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to the tiny life inside me. "I don't know how yet, but we will be." My wolf stirred, faint but present. She didn't believe me. I wasn't sure I believed me either. Dr. Okonkwo was a tall woman with dark skin, intelligent eyes, and hands that moved with confident precision. The clinic was clean but obviously underfunded, donation bins in the corner, slightly outdated equipment, motivational posters peeling at the edges. "First prenatal visit?" she asked, washing her hands. "Yes." "How far along?" 14 weeks, I think." She nodded, pulling on gloves. "Let's take a look. Any complications? Bleeding? Severe pain? Dizziness?" "Just tired. All the time. Normal for first trimester, but let's make sure." She was professional, efficient, but not unkind. The kind of doctor who'd seen everything and learned not to judge. The ultrasound gel was cold. I flinched. "Sorry," Dr. Okonkwo murmured, moving the wand across my stomach. The screen beside her flickered, and then, a heartbeat, fast and strong, filling the small exam room with sound. "There we are," the doctor said softly. "Good, strong heartbeat. Measuring right on track for 14 weeks. She paused, tilting her head. My own heart stuttered. "What? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She adjusted the wand, her expression thoughtful. "But your hormone levels, they're unusually high, and the baby is measuring slightly larger than expected. Not concerning, just notable." I stared at the screen, at the tiny shape that was somehow a person. My person. Is that bad? Not necessarily. Could just mean a healthy, robust baby. We'll monitor it. She handed me paper towels to wipe off the gel. "But Kenna, I need to ask, is there anything unusual about the father's biology? Any family history of twins, or abnormal growth patterns?" I thought about that night 6 weeks ago. The male whose scent had made my broken wolf sing. The way shadows seemed to cling to him. How his presence had felt impossibly large, like the air itself bent around him. "I don't know," I admitted. I don't know who he is." Dr. Okonkwo's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. "Okay. We'll just keep a close eye on things. I want to see you every 2 weeks instead of monthly. Can you manage that?" "Mrs. Bonita, the librarian who sent me, she said, you don't ask questions." "I don't ask questions that aren't medically relevant." She stripped off her gloves. "But I do ask this. Are you safe? Where you're living now, are you safe?" "Yes." "Good. Because that baby needs you healthy and whole. Understand?" I nodded. "All right. Stop at the front desk for prenatal vitamins, they're free. And Kenna?" She waited until I met her eyes. "You're going to be a good mother." "I can tell." I walked back to the library in the gray afternoon light, my hand pressed protectively over my stomach. The baby was real now, not just a concept, but a person with a heartbeat and a future, measuring larger than expected. What did that mean? Was it because of me, my broken genetics somehow affecting the child? Or was it because of him, the mysterious male whose touch had been gentle but whose presence had felt like compressed power? I'd tried not to think about him over the past weeks. What was the point? He was gone. Probably didn't even remember me, just another encounter in a long line of encounters. But now, with Dr. Okonkwo's words echoing in my head, I couldn't help but wonder, who was he? The library was quiet when I returned. Late afternoon, the lull between school letting out and evening regulars arriving. I shelved returns in the fiction section, letting the familiar rhythm soothe my racing thoughts. I was pushing the cart toward the romance novels when the door chimed, and my wolf, silent for weeks, suddenly screamed, not in fear, in recognition. I turned slowly, my heart a drum in my chest. He stood just inside the entrance, dressed in dark clothes that looked expensive even from a distance. Tall, taller than I remembered. Broad-shouldered, His face was partially shadowed, but I'd know that presence anywhere. The way the air seemed to thicken around him, like reality itself made space for his existence. Our eyes met across the library. His widened. Shock. Then something else. Something I couldn't name flickered across his features. He moved toward me with predatory grace, and I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he wasn't just some male. The way other patrons unconsciously shifted out of his path, the weight of his presence, the absolute authority in his bearing. This was someone important, someone powerful, and I'd spent one night with him and then disappeared without a word. "You," he said, his voice low and rough. Up close, I could see his eyes pale gold, almost amber. Wolf eyes, even in human form. "I've been looking for you." My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, a protective gesture I didn't even register until his gaze followed the movement. He went utterly still. "How far along?" The question was barely a whisper. 15 weeks. His eyes snapped back to my face. I watched him do the math, watched the realization settle over him like a mantle. Mine? I could have lied. Should have lied. Told him it was someone else's, sent him away. Protected myself from whatever complication this would bring, but my broken wolf was singing for the first time in weeks, and the baby inside me fluttered like it recognized its father's voice. Yes, he closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they held something that looked like grief, or relief, or both. "What's your name?" he asked. Kenna Blythe." I paused. "What's yours?" His jaw tightened. Around us, I noticed Mrs. Bonita had emerged from her office, her expression alert. A couple of patrons had stopped browsing, their attention caught by whatever energy was radiating from this male. "My name," he said slowly, "is Richard Werner." The name meant nothing to me. Should it have? But then Mrs. Bonita made a small, strangled sound, and I saw recognition and fear flash across her human features. "And you," Richard continued, his eyes never leaving mine, "are carrying the heir to the northern throne." The library tilted. Or maybe that was just me. The world reshaping itself around this new, impossible truth. I'd slept with royalty. No worse than that. I'd slept with the Alpha King, and my family, the pack that had disowned me, the wolves who'd spent my entire life telling me I was worthless. They had no idea. Chapter 2. The Impossible Claim. The Alpha King was standing in a public library, staring at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. I was standing in a public library, pregnant with his child, wearing clothes from a donation bin and living above a building that smelled like old paper and broken dreams. The universe, I decided, had a cruel sense of humor. "We need to talk," Richard said, his voice low enough that the other patrons couldn't hear but commanding enough that it wasn't a request. Privately, Mrs. Bonita materialized beside me with impressive speed for a woman her age. "The library has a private office," she said, her tone crisp and protective. "You may use it, but the door stays open." Richard's eyes flicked to her, and I saw something like approval in his expression. "Agreed." He gestured for me to lead the way, and I became acutely aware of how I must look to him, gaunt, exhausted, my dark hair pulled into a messy knot, my clothes hanging loose on my frame, not exactly the image of someone carrying royal offspring. The office was small, cluttered with filing cabinets and stacks of inventory sheets. I sat in Mrs. Bonita's desk chair because my legs were shaking. Richard remained standing, filling the cramped space with his presence. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I looked for you," he finally said. "After that night, I went back to the border crossing every day for 2 weeks. You were just gone. I didn't know you were looking." My voice sounded small even to my own ears. "You didn't tell me your name. Didn't tell me anything about yourself." I couldn't. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in the gesture. The situation was complicated. I was traveling incognito, trying to avoid detection. If anyone had known the Alpha King was wandering territorial borders alone. "Why were you there?" I interrupted. "At the border, alone." His jaw tightened. Because even kings need to escape their cages sometimes. I understood that sentiment more than he could possibly know. So you found me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Now what? Now? He moved closer, then seemed to catch himself, maintaining distance. Now you tell me why you're living in a human shelter, working in a library, looking like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks. Shame burned through me. I'm fine. You're not fine. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Kenna, you're pregnant with my child. You should be. He stopped, his expression darkening. Where's your pack? Your family? Gone. Gone where? Just gone. I wrapped my arms around myself, a protective gesture. They don't want me. They made that clear. His eyes narrowed dangerously. They disowned you. It wasn't a question. Somehow, he'd read the entire story in my body language. In the careful way, I didn't say the word myself. It doesn't matter, I said quickly. I'm managing. Mrs. Bonita gave me a place to stay, and the doctor says the baby is healthy. It matters. His voice dropped to something barely above a growl, and I felt the weight of his wolf press against the air between us. Not threatening me, threatening the ghosts of my family. It matters that they threw you out when you were vulnerable, that they left you with nothing. What pack was it? I'm not telling you that. Kenna. No. I stood, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You don't get to swoop in and fix this with royal authority or whatever. They made their choice. I made mine. It's done. He studied me with those unsettling amber eyes. You're protecting them. Even after what they did to you. I'm protecting myself, I corrected. From becoming someone's political scandal. From being the reason the Alpha King wages war on some insignificant border pack. From being even more of a burden than I already am. A burden. He repeated the word like it tasted wrong. Is that what you think you are? I laughed, the sound bitter. I know what I am. I'm a broken omega with a malformed wolf who got pregnant by a male I didn't know, and now I'm carrying a child that will probably be as defective as I am. So yes, Your Majesty, I'm a burden. Let's not pretend otherwise. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Your Majesty, he finally said, his voice quiet. You called me Your Majesty. Isn't that what I'm supposed to call you? That night at the border, you called me something else. You didn't know who I was, so you just talked to me, like I was anyone. Do you remember what you said? I did remember. I'd told him he looked sad, asked if he needed someone to listen. Offered him the only thing I had: companionship, conversation, the simple act of being seen. Things are different now, I whispered. They don't have to be. Of course they do. I gestured between us, at the absurd gulf of status and power and worth. You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. This baby, my hand pressed protectively over my stomach. This baby deserves better than a mother who can barely shift, and a scandal that will follow them their entire life. Richard moved then, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. He didn't touch me, but his presence surrounded me, and my traitorous wolf purred in recognition. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice low and intense. You are not nobody, you are not broken, and you are not a burden. Whoever told you those things lied. My wolf. Your wolf is quiet, not malformed. I felt her that night. She's there, Kenna. She's just waiting for something. For what? I don't know yet. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently lifted my chin so I had to meet his eyes. But I know this. You're carrying my child. That makes you under my protection. That makes you part of my responsibility. And I don't abandon what's mine. Mine. The words sent shivers down my spine for reasons I didn't want to examine. What are you proposing? I asked. Come back with me. To the Northern Palace. You'll have medical care, proper nutrition, safety. The baby will have everything they need. As what? Your charity case? His jaw tightened. As the mother of my heir. And when people ask who I am, what I am, I'll tell them the truth. Which is... He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb brushing absently against my jaw, a gesture so gentle it made my chest ache. That you're someone I should have looked harder for. he finally said. Someone I should have protected from the moment I realized what we'd created together. It was a pretty answer. A kingly answer. It wasn't love. But then again, I'd stopped believing in that particular fairy tale the moment my father's hand connected with my face. I need time, I said. To think about this. How much time? I don't know. A day? 2? He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him. He stepped back, pulling a card from his pocket. My private number. Call me when you decide. He paused at the door. Kenna? That night at the border, I didn't know you were from a pack that would abandon you. Didn't know you were vulnerable. If I had, what would you have done differently? Everything. The word hung in the air between us. I would have done everything differently. Then he was gone, and I was alone in Mrs. Bonita's office, holding a business card with a phone number that could change my entire life. Mrs. Bonita brought me tea without being asked. We sat in the back corner of the library after closing, surrounded by returns that needed shelving. The Alpha King, she said mildly, like she was commenting on the weather. That's not something you see every day in a public library. I didn't know, I said quietly. I didn't know who he was. Would it have mattered? I thought about that. About the male I'd met at the border crossing sad-eyed and seeking escape, treating me like I was worth listening to, touching me like I was precious instead of broken. No, I admitted. It wouldn't have. He's offering you protection, Mrs. Bonita said. Safety. Resources for you and the baby. Those aren't small things, Kenna. I know. But you're afraid. Terrified. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. What if I go there and realize I'm even more out of place than I was in my own pack? What if the baby is born broken like me, and then I've dragged them into a world where they'll be judged even more harshly? What if you're braver than you think? Mrs. Bonita interrupted gently. What if that baby needs you to be brave? I looked down at my stomach, still barely showing under my loose sweater. 15 weeks. 4 more months until I'd hold this tiny person in my arms. 4 more months to figure out who I was supposed to be. He said my wolf isn't malformed, I whispered. That she's just waiting for something. Do you believe him? I don't know what I believe anymore. I set down the tea, suddenly exhausted. My whole life, I was told I was less than. Defective. Wrong, and I believed it because everyone I trusted said it was true. But then this stranger, this king, looks at me like I'm something worth protecting. And I don't. I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Mrs. Bonita reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My grandmother used to say that sometimes we can't see our own worth because we're too busy looking at it through other people's eyes. Maybe it's time to look through your own. I called him the next morning. I'll come with you, I said without preamble. But I have conditions. Name them. His voice was alert, focused. I'm not a prisoner. If I want to leave, I leave. Agreed. I make my own decisions about the pregnancy. My body, my choice. Of course. And I took a breath. No one can know about my past. My pack, my family. Why I left. That stays private. He was quiet for a moment. Kenna, people will ask questions. The mother of the heir appearing from nowhere, then make something up. Tell them I'm from a distant pack, or that we met during your travels, or that it's none of their business. But I won't be pitied. I won't be the tragic story everyone whispers about. That's non-negotiable. All right, he said softly. Your past stays yours. Anything else? Yes. One more thing. What? That night at the border you told me I was perfect. That I shouldn't let them tell me otherwise. I gripped the phone tighter. Did you mean that? Or was it just something you say? The silence stretched so long I thought the connection had dropped. I meant it, he finally said, his voice rough. Every word. Then prove it. When I get there, when people look at me and see someone who doesn't fit, someone who's broken, prove to me that you meant it. I will. It sounded like a vow. I'll send a car for you this afternoon. Pack what you need. Kenna? Yes? Thank you. For trusting me with this. I hung up before I could tell him that trust had nothing to do with it. Survival did. Mrs. Bonita helped me pack my meager belongings, a process that took all of 20 minutes. Everything I owned in the world fit into 2 bags. "You'll write to me?" she asked, pressing a small book into my hands. "Jane Eyre. To let me know you're all right?" "I will." I hugged her, this human woman who'd shown me more kindness in 3 weeks than my own family had in 23 years. "Thank you. For everything. You're going to be fine," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you know." I wished I believed her. The car that arrived was sleek, black, and had tinted windows that screamed important person inside. The driver was a beta wolf with kind eyes who introduced himself as James and treated me like I was made of glass. As we pulled away from the library, I watched my tiny apartment window disappear from view, the first place that had felt safe, the first place that had been mine. "Nervous?" James asked, catching my expression in the rearview mirror. "Terrified," I admitted. "Don't be. His Majesty is different than you'd expect. Good, different." He paused. "And the palace staff, we take care of our own." "You'll see. Our own." As if I could ever belong in a place like that. The drive took 3 hours. We left the human district, crossed through neutral territory, and entered packlands that grew progressively more affluent. Bigger houses, nicer cars, wolves who looked sleek and well-fed, and confident in their place in the world. Everything I wasn't. And then, cresting a hill, I saw it. The Northern Palace. It wasn't a castle too modern for that, but it was massive. Stone and glass and sharp architectural lines that spoke of power and permanence. The kind of place that had stood for generations and would stand for generations more. The kind of place where broken omegas didn't belong. James pulled up to a side entrance, not the grand front doors. "More private this way," he explained. "His Majesty thought you might appreciate not being on display." That small consideration, the awareness that I might want privacy, dignity, made something in my chest crack. Richard was waiting just inside the door. He'd changed from his library clothes into something more formal, but his eyes held the same intensity they'd had yesterday. When he saw me, something in his expression softened. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." He reached for my bags, but I held on to them. "I can carry my own things." "I know you can." But he didn't push. "Come on. I'll show you to your rooms." Rooms, plural. He led me through corridors that were both beautiful and intimidating, marble floors. Artwork that probably cost more than my entire pack's annual income. Windows that overlooked manicured grounds. We stopped at a door near the end of a quiet hallway. "These will be yours," Richard said, opening the door. "Private suite. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room. The medical wing is 2 floors down. I've already arranged for Dr. Marissa Torres to oversee your prenatal care. She's the best in the territory." I stepped inside, and my breath caught. The rooms were beautiful, not ostentatious, but comfortable, soft colors, good lighting, furniture that looked actually meant to be used, and books. An entire wall of shelves, already stocked with volumes. "You mentioned you like to read," Richard said quietly from the doorway. I had the staff put together a collection. "If there's anything specific you want, just ask." I touched the spines gently. Fiction, non-fiction, poetry. A careful, curated selection that spoke of attention and thought. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, not turning around. "Because you're carrying my child. That's not enough of a reason to give me a palace suite and a private library." I heard him move closer. Felt his presence at my back. "Then how about this? Because that night at the border, you looked at me like I was a person, not a title. Because you asked if I needed someone to listen. Because you gave me something I'd been searching for my entire life, a moment where I could just be." His voice dropped. "And because I failed to protect you once already, I won't make that mistake twice." I turned to face him. He was closer than I expected, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "I'm not your responsibility," I said softly. "Yes, you are, whether you like it or not." He reached out, slowly, and pressed his palm gently against my stomach. "Both of you are. And for the first time since my father's hand connected with my face, since my mother looked through me like I was already gone, since I walked across that territory line alone and abandoned, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone actually meant it when they said I was worth protecting. Even if that someone was a king, even if I was still broken, even if this was all temporary. For now, in this moment, it was enough. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. The first week in the palace taught me that luxury could be its own kind of prison. My rooms were beautiful, the food was exquisite, the staff were unfailingly polite, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. Richard was absent. Not cruelly, so he checked in daily, always asking about my health, the baby, whether I needed anything. But there was a distance to it, a formality that hadn't existed in Mrs. Bonita's cramped office or that night at the border crossing. He was the alpha king here, and I was a complication he was managing with careful precision. Dr. Torres was everything Richard had promised, competent, thorough, and blessedly discreet. She examined me in the medical wing with the same professional detachment Dr. Okonkwo had shown, though her equipment was far more advanced. "Baby's measuring well," she said during my first appointment, studying the ultrasound screen. "Heart rate is strong, growth is actually slightly advanced for 16 weeks. "Is that bad?" I asked, remembering Dr. Okonkwo's similar observation. "Not necessarily. Royal bloodlines often produce robust offspring." She glanced at me, her expression carefully neutral. "The father's genetics are significant." Significant. A diplomatic way of saying the Alpha King's child would be anything but ordinary. "And my genetics?" I couldn't help asking. Your wolf is quiet, Doctor," Torres interrupted gently. "That's different from absent, and pregnancy can affect shifting ability, especially in the first and third trimesters. Let's not borrow trouble, But trouble, I was learning, had a way of finding me anyway. It started with the whispers. I heard them when I ventured out of my rooms to explore the palace grounds. Staff members who didn't realize I was within earshot, their voices low but carrying in the marble hallways, appeared out of nowhere. "No pack affiliation listed. King's been so secretive about her. Probably some border trash he took pity on." That last one stung more than it should have. Because it was true, wasn't it? I was border trash. A discarded Omega with nowhere else to go. I retreated to my rooms after that, venturing out only for medical appointments and meals I took alone in my suite. The books Richard had provided became my escape, just as they'd always been. I was deep into a fantasy novel about a girl who discovered she had hidden power when someone knocked on my door. Not the staff they announced themselves verbally before entering. This was a firm, authoritative knock that expected to be answered. I opened the door to find a woman standing in the hallway. She was perhaps 40, beautiful in that sharp, maintained way that spoke of status and power. Her blonde hair was pulled into an elegant twist, and her eyes the same amber gold as Richard's assessed me with cool precision. "So you're the mystery girl," she said without preamble. "May I come in?" It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside, and she swept into my sitting room with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. "I'm Leanna Werner," she said, settling into one of my chairs like she owned it. "Richard's sister, though he's apparently decided to keep you hidden away like some kind of secret, so I had to hunt you down myself." His sister. I should have guessed from the family resemblance. "I'm Kenna," I said quietly, remaining standing. "Yes, I know. Kenna of no last name, no pack affiliation, no history." Her smile was sharp, very mysterious, very unlike my brother to be so secretive. "He's protecting my privacy, or protecting his reputation." She crossed her legs, studying me with unnerving focus. "You're carrying his child, yes?" There was no point in denying it. "Yes. How far along?" 16 weeks. "And you met him?" "That's between Richard and me." Her eyebrows rose. "You've got spine. I'll give you that." She stood, moving closer. "Let me be direct, since my brother seems incapable of it. You appearing pregnant with the heir has caused complications. Political ones. Richard has rejected 3 marriage alliances in the past year, and now suddenly there's a child on the way with a woman no one's ever heard of. People are talking. Let them talk. Easy to say when you're hidden away in a gilded cage. Her voice wasn't cruel, exactly, but it wasn't kind either. Harder when you're the one standing beside him in public, being measured against every eligible female in the Northern Territory. And trust me, they will measure you. Against your bloodline, your wolf, your worthiness to carry royal offspring. Everything she was saying, I'd already thought 1,000 times over in the past week. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because my brother is brilliant at strategy and terrible at people. He thinks keeping you hidden is protecting you. But all it's doing is making you seem like something shameful, like you're not good enough to be acknowledged. She moved toward the door, then paused. If you want to survive here, Kenna of Nowhere, you're going to have to be more than just the mother of his child. You're going to have to prove you belong. And if I can't? Her smile was almost pitying. Then you'll be exactly what everyone already suspects, a mistake he's too honorable to abandon. She left, and I sank into the chair she'd vacated, her words echoing in my head. A mistake he's too honorable to abandon. Was that all I was? I didn't see Richard for 3 days after Leanna's visit. According to the staff, he was dealing with diplomatic matters in the capital. Important things. King things. Things that had nothing to do with the broken Omega carrying his child. I spent the time reading, sleeping, and trying to ignore the way my wolf had gone completely silent again. She'd stirred when Richard was near, but now nothing. Just that familiar emptiness in my chest, where a proper wolf should be. On the 4th day, he appeared at my door, just after sunset. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. But he smiled when he saw me, and something in my traitorous heart fluttered. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, and he entered my sitting room, immediately moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. For a long moment, he just stood there, and I studied his profile in the dying light. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "for being absent. I didn't mean to. I should have checked in more. You're the Alpha King, you're busy. That's not an excuse." He turned to face me. "How are you feeling? How's the baby?" "Dr. Torres says everything is progressing normally. The baby is healthy. And you?" The question caught me off guard. Not how's the pregnancy, but how are you? Such a small distinction. Such a different thing entirely. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Kenna." His voice was gentle but firm. I can smell the lie. Right. Wolf senses. I kept forgetting he could read my body's responses even when my words were carefully neutral. "Your sister visited me," I said, instead of answering. His expression darkened. "Leanna, what did she say?" "That I'm a political complication. That people are talking. That by hiding me away, you're making it seem like I'm something to be ashamed of." "You're not. Aren't I?" I interrupted. "Be honest, Richard. If I were from a prominent pack, if my bloodline were impressive, if my wolf were strong, would I still be hidden in these rooms? Or would you have introduced me to your court already?" The silence that followed was damning. "It's not about shame," he finally said, his voice rough. "It's about protecting you. The moment I present you publicly, you become a target. For political rivals, for females who wanted to be in your position, for anyone who thinks they can use you to get to me. So I'm supposed to hide forever? No. Just until we figure this out." "Figure what out?" He moved closer, and I caught his scent, pine and winter air, and something uniquely him that made my wolf stir weakly. "How to keep you safe," he said quietly. "How to give our child the best possible future. How to navigate the fact that I'm the Alpha King and you're a nobody." I finished for him. A broken Omega, with no pack and no prospects. "You can say it." "That's not what I was going to say." "Then what were you going to say?" He reached out, his hand cupping my face with that same gentle reverence he'd shown at the border crossing, in the library, in this very room, a week ago. "That you're the woman who made me feel human for the first time in years. Who looked at me and saw a person, not a crown. Who's carrying my child and facing a world that will judge her for it with more courage than most of my trained warriors." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. And I don't know how to protect that. How to protect you from what's coming. My chest ached. Maybe you can't. I have to. His voice was fierce. I failed you once, Kenna. I'm not doing it again. You didn't fail me. You didn't even know. I should have looked harder. Should have found you before you were living in a shelter. Before you were alone and scared. His other hand moved to my stomach, pressing gently against the small swell. Before our child's mother was going through hell while I sat in my palace completely unaware. Stop, I whispered. Stop making yourself the villain of this story. You're not. The villains are the family who threw me out. The pack that decided I was disposable. Not you. Then let me be the hero. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt the tension radiating through him. Let me fix this. You can't fix me. I'm not broken in ways that can be mended with money or status, or, you're not broken at all. His voice was absolute. And I'm going to prove that to you, even if it takes the rest of my life. The promise hung between us, dangerous and beautiful and terrifying, because I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone as powerful and certain as the Alpha King could look at me and see something worth protecting, worth keeping, worth more than the sum of my failures. But I'd believed people before. Believed my family when they said blood was thicker than water. Believed my pack when they said everyone had a place. And look where that had gotten me. I met with Dr. Torres yesterday, I said, changing the subject before I could do something stupid like cry. She wants to do a more detailed scan next week, to check the baby's development. Richard pulled back slightly, his hand still framing my face. I want to be there. For the appointment. You don't have to. I want to, he insisted. If you'll let me. The question in his eyes, the uncertainty, the genuine desire to be included, cracked something in my carefully maintained walls. Okay, I whispered. You can come. His smile was worth every risk I was taking. The week passed in a strange sort of limbo. Richard visited every evening, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for a few minutes between meetings. We talked about nothing. About everything. He told me about his responsibilities as king, the political maneuvering that consumed his days. I told him about the books I was reading, the way the baby moved now when I was quiet. We didn't talk about the future. Didn't discuss what would happen when the baby was born, when I couldn't hide in these rooms anymore, when the world would demand answers about who I was and why I mattered. We existed in the present, and it was both comforting and terrifying. The night before the ultrasound appointment, I had a nightmare. I was back in my family's living room, but this time I was holding a baby. My father was there, and Richard, and they were arguing over the child pulling, demanding, each claiming ownership. And I was screaming but no sound came out, and my wolf was dying in my chest, and the baby was crying. I woke gasping, my hands pressed protectively over my stomach. You're okay, I whispered to the baby. We're okay, we're safe. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Dr. Torres's ultrasound room was more advanced than anything I'd seen before. Multiple screens, 3D imaging capabilities, equipment that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Richard arrived exactly on time, dressed more casually than usual in dark jeans, and a sweater that somehow made him look more intimidating, not less. Ready? He asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The gel was cold. Dr. Torres moved the wand across my stomach with practiced ease, and the screens flickered to life. And there, in crystalline detail, was our baby. Oh, I breathed. Look at that, Doctor, Torres murmured, adjusting the image. Baby is very active today. You can see the hands here, moving, and there's the heartbeat strong and steady at 152 beats per minute. I couldn't look away. The tiny person on the screen was so much more defined than the blob from my first ultrasound. I could see features, movement, the curl of tiny fingers. That's our child, Richard said, his voice filled with wonder. His hand found mine, threading our fingers together. Kenna, that's our child. Everything looks excellent, Dr. Torres continued. Growth is right on track actually, slightly advanced. Baby is measuring closer to 18 weeks rather than 17. And she paused, adjusting the angle. Would you like to know the sex? I looked at Richard. His eyes were still fixed on the screen, but he squeezed my hand. Yes, we said simultaneously. Dr. Torres smiled. Congratulations, you're having a son. A son. The word echoed through me, reshaping everything. Not just a baby, but a person. A boy who would grow up in this palace, with this king as his father, carrying royal blood through his veins. A boy who would also carry my broken genes, my malformed wolf, my legacy of inadequacy. He's perfect, Richard whispered, and I heard the emotion threading through his voice. Absolutely perfect. Dr. Torres printed several images for us, explaining details about development and growth that I barely processed. All I could see was that tiny form on the screen. My son, real and alive and depending on me to keep him safe. When the appointment ended, Richard walked me back to my rooms in silence. But it wasn't an uncomfortable quiet, it was the kind of silence that came from both being lost in the same overwhelming revelation. At my door, he finally spoke. A son. He said it like he was testing the word, tasting its weight. We're having a son. Are you disappointed? I asked. That it's not a daughter? Disappointed? He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Kenna, I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But disappointed? Never. Even though he might be like me? Broken? His hand came up to cup my face, that gesture I was beginning to crave. He's not going to be broken, and neither are you. His voice was firm. But even if he is exactly like you, quiet wolf, gentle soul, more comfortable with books than battles, I will love him fiercely. Just like I. He stopped abruptly, the unfinished sentence hanging between us. Just like I love you. That's what he'd almost said. I could see it in his eyes, feel it in the way his thumb brushed across my cheek. But he didn't say it, because saying it would make this real in ways neither of us was ready for. Get some rest, he said instead, stepping back. You and our son need it. After he left, I stood in my sitting room. One of the ultrasound pictures clutched in my hand. A son, mine and Richard's. Half broken Omega, half Alpha King. What kind of future waited for a child caught between two such different worlds? That night, for the first time since arriving at the palace, my wolf stirred. Not strongly, not dramatically. But there, a faint presence in my chest, like a candle flame flickering to life in the dark. I pressed my hand over my heart, then moved it to my stomach where my son grew. We're going to figure this out, I whispered. Somehow. My wolf didn't answer, but she didn't retreat either. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 4. The Emerald Promise. The invitation arrived 3 days after the ultrasound. Thick cream cardstock, elegant script, sealed with the Northern Territory's official emblem. I stared at it on my breakfast tray like it might bite me. You are cordially invited to the Spring Equinox Gala. Formal attire required. Partners welcome. It wasn't addressed to me specifically. According to the note attached in Richard's handwriting, every member of the palace household received one, but the subtext was clear. This was my opportunity to stop hiding, or my opportunity to be publicly humiliated. Depending on how you looked at it. I was still staring at the invitation when Liana appeared at my door, not bothering to knock. So he's finally letting you out of your cage, she said, eyeing the cardstock in my hand. About time. I don't have to go, I said. Of course you do. Unless you want to spend the rest of your pregnancy, and possibly your life hidden away like some shameful secret. She moved to my closet, opening it to reveal the modest collection of clothes the staff had provided. We're going to need to do something about this. About what? Your wardrobe. You can't show up to the spring gala looking like you've been shopping at human donation centers. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my stylist. Don't argue. Liana, listen to me, Kenna. She turned, her expression serious. I wasn't kind when we first met. I was testing you, seeing if you'd break easily. You didn't. That's good. But now the real test comes facing my brother's court, the pack hierarchy, every female who's been vying for his attention. They will eat you alive if you show weakness. I'm not strong like you, I said quietly. I can't just pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not asking you to pretend. She sat beside me on the couch. I'm asking you to remember that you're carrying the future heir to the Northern Throne. That alone gives you power, whether you believe it or not. But you have to act like it. And if I can't? Then my brother is going to spend the entire night defending you instead of enjoying himself. And you're going to spend it proving everyone right who said you weren't strong enough for this life. She squeezed my hand briefly. I don't want to see either of those things happen. It was the closest thing to kindness she'd shown me. I found myself gripping her hand back. I don't know how to be what he needs, I admitted. None of us do. We just fake it until it becomes real. She stood, already dialing. Now, let's make sure you look like you belong, even if you don't feel it yet. The stylist's name was Dominic, and he descended on my rooms like a whirlwind of fabric swatches and measuring tape. He was a beta wolf with impeccable taste, and absolutely no filter. Darling, we have work to do, he announced, circling me like a predator. But good bones. Excellent bone structure, actually. And that hair, we can work with that hair. I don't want anything too flashy, I said nervously. Flashy? No. We want elegant, regal, understated but unmistakable. He held up a swatch of deep emerald fabric. This is your color. Brings out your eyes, complements your skin tone. Yes? I had no idea. I'd never thought about my colors or skin tone or any of it. Sure, I said weakly. Over the next 3 hours, I was measured, draped, pinned, and photographed from every angle. Dominic worked with intense focus, muttering to himself about hemlines and necklines, and the proper way to accommodate a baby bump without looking matronly. The gala is in 5 days, he announced finally. Your dress will be ready the morning of. Don't worry, you're going to be stunning. After he left, I collapsed onto my couch, exhausted. Leanna had stayed the entire time, offering opinions and deflecting Dominic's more outrageous suggestions. Now, she studied me with something like approval. You survived fashion by Dominic. That's actually impressive. I feel like I've been through a war. That was just the first battle. She moved toward the door. The real war starts at the gala. But Kenna? I'll be there. Not to protect you, you don't need that. But to make sure everyone knows you're not alone. It was more than I'd expected from her. More than I probably deserved. Why are you helping me? I asked. She paused, her hand on the doorframe. Because my brother has been lonely his entire life. Burdened by duty. Isolated by his crown. And then you happened, and I saw something in his eyes I haven't seen in years. Hope. She looked back at me. Don't make me regret defending you. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the weight of expectations I didn't know how to meet. Richard found me that evening in the palace gardens. I'd started walking there after dinner, needing air and space and something other than the 4 walls of my rooms. You got the invitation, he said, falling into step beside me. Yes, and I'm terrified. No point in lying, he could smell my anxiety anyway. He was quiet for a moment, our footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The spring flowers were blooming, their scent heavy in the evening air. I should have asked you first, he finally said. Before sending the invitation, should have prepared you, made sure you were ready. Would I ever be ready? Probably not. He smiled slightly. I'm not sure I'm ready, and I've been doing this my whole life. We stopped at a fountain, the water catching the last rays of sunset. I sat on the stone edge, and Richard joined me. People are going to stare, I said quietly. They're going to wonder who I am, where I came from, whether I'm worthy of you. They can wonder all they want. It doesn't change the truth, which is, he turned to face me fully, that you're the mother of my child, that you're under my protection, that anyone who disrespects you disrespects me. That's not the same as me actually belonging there. Kenna. His hand found mine. You belong wherever I say you belong. That's how this works. That's not how I work. I pulled my hand back gently. I can't just borrow your authority, Richard. I need to. I need to find my own footing, my own worth, or I'm just going to be an extension of you, and that's not. I can't be that. He studied me for a long moment. You're right. I'm sorry. I keep trying to fix this with power and position, and that's not what you need. I don't know what I need, I admitted. Just Time, maybe, and patience, while I figure out how to exist in a world that was never meant for people like me. People like you, he repeated softly. Intelligent, brave, kind people who see past appearances to what matters. Broken people, I corrected, with malformed wolves and no pack and a history they're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of you. You should be. Well, I'm not. His voice was firm. And at the gala, when people meet you for the first time, they're going to see what I see. Someone remarkable who's been told she's ordinary for so long she started to believe it. I wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons he was wrong. All the evidence of my inadequacy. But my son chose that moment to kick. A strong flutter that made me gasp and press my hand to my stomach. Richard's eyes widened. Was that? He's moving. I grabbed Richard's hand and placed it where I'd felt the kick. Wait. He might do it again. We sat in silence, his palm warm against my belly. And then there, another kick, stronger this time. The expression on Richard's face was pure wonder. That's our son. Yes. He's strong. He is. I covered his hand with mine. Richard, what if he's like me? What if my broken genetics affect him? Then he'll be like his mother, beautiful, intelligent, and far stronger than anyone gives him credit for. He met my eyes. And I will love him exactly as he is, just like I. He stopped again, that same abrupt halt as before. Just like I love you. The unspoken words hung between us, as tangible as the baby moving under our joined hands. Just like you what? I whispered, needing to hear it even though I knew it was dangerous. His jaw tightened. Just like I'm starting to feel things I shouldn't. Not yet. Not when everything is so complicated. What kind of things? Kenna. My name was a warning and a plea. Don't ask me questions I can't answer without making this harder. Harder than it already is? Yes. He pulled his hand back, standing abruptly. Because if I tell you what I'm feeling, you'll think it's about obligation, or duty, or guilt. And it's not. It's too soon. For both of us. He was right. I knew he was right. But part of me, the broken, lonely part that had been starving for affection my entire life, wanted him to say it anyway. I should go, he said. I have meetings in the morning. But Kenna? About the gala, you don't have to go if you don't want to. I won't force you into something you're not ready for. Your sister says I have to prove I belong. My sister has a lot of opinions. He smiled slightly. But she's not wrong. The gala would be a good opportunity to show the court that you're not hiding, that you have nothing to hide. Even though I do? Your past is your past. You don't owe anyone those details. He moved closer, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. But your future, our son's future that starts at the gala, when you walk into that ballroom beside me and show everyone that you're exactly where you're meant to be. And, if I can't convince them, then convince yourself first. His thumb brushed across my jaw. The rest will follow. The days before the gala passed in a blur of preparation. Dominic returned twice to adjust the dress. Liana coached me on court politics, drilling me on names and faces and which families held what grudges. Even the palace staff seemed invested in my success, offering encouragement and advice with genuine warmth. I practiced walking in heels, something I'd rarely done. Practiced making conversation, holding my head high, smiling like I wasn't terrified. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, one hand on my stomach where my son rested, and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. You can do this, I told myself. You've survived worse. Your family's rejection, living in a shelter, being alone and pregnant with nowhere to go. A fancy party should be easy compared to that, but it wasn't the party I was afraid of. It was the moment when Richard's court looked at me and saw exactly what I was, a nobody trying to play a role she'd never been meant for. It was the moment when Richard himself realized he'd made a mistake, that the woman from the border crossing wasn't who he thought she was. It was the moment when I proved, once and for all, that my family had been right about me. My wolf stirred, still weak but present. For the first time, I felt something from her, not words exactly, but a sense. A feeling. Survive. It was what we'd always done. What we'd always been good at. So maybe I couldn't be elegant or sophisticated or worthy of a king, but I could survive. And for now, that would have to be enough. The morning of the gala, I woke to find a box outside my door. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver with a single emerald pendant that matched the dress Dominic had made. The note attached was in Richard's handwriting. This belonged to my grandmother. She wore it on her wedding day, and my grandfather told her it was the color of hope. I think she'd want you to have it. You're going to be magnificent tonight. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. D. I held the necklace up to the light, watching the emerald catch the sun. The color of hope. I fastened it around my neck, and for the first time since the invitation arrived, I felt something other than fear. Maybe I wouldn't be magnificent. Maybe I would stumble and fail and prove everyone's doubts correct. But I would be wearing the Alpha King's grandmother's necklace. I would be carrying his son, and I would walk into that ballroom like I had every right to be there, even if I had to fake it every single step of the way. Chapter 5. The Spring Equinox Gala. The dress was a masterpiece. Deep emerald silk that draped elegantly over my growing belly. The fabric flowing in a way that made the pregnancy look intentional. Beautiful even. The neckline was modest but sophisticated, and the back dipped just low enough to be interesting without being scandalous. Dominic had somehow managed to make me look regal. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. "You look like a queen," Liana said from the doorway. She was stunning in midnight blue. Her blonde hair swept up in an intricate style that probably took hours. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," I corrected. "Same thing, initially." She moved closer, adjusting the necklace so it lay perfectly. "My grandmother's emerald. Richard gave you that?" "This morning." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe approval. "He's never let anyone wear that before, not even the females he courted seriously." My stomach flipped. "Should I not?" "No, you should absolutely wear it. It sends a message." She met my eyes in the mirror. "That you're not temporary. That you matter to him. That's important, Kenna. Especially tonight." There was a knock at the door, sharp, precise. Richard's knock. Liana squeezed my shoulder. "Remember what I taught you. Head up, shoulders back, smile like you have secrets. And if anyone asks intrusive questions, you smile wider and say, 'How interesting that you'd ask that,' and change the subject." Then she slipped out through the connecting door to the hallway, leaving me alone to face him. I opened the door. Richard stood in full formal attire, a black suit tailored perfectly to his frame, silver accents that caught the light. His hair was styled back from his face, making his amber eyes even more striking. He looked every inch the Alpha King, and the way he looked at me like I'd stolen his breath made my knees weak. "Kenna," he breathed. "You're pretending to be someone I'm not?" "Stunning." He stepped inside, his eyes never leaving mine. "Absolutely stunning. That dress, the necklace, you're perfect." Dominic picked the dress. "You provided the necklace. I'm just wearing them. You're more than what you wear." He moved closer, and I caught his scent different tonight, richer. He'd done something to mask his usual pine and winter air with something more sophisticated, but underneath I could still smell him. "Are you ready?" "No." "Good. Neither am I, and I've been attending these things my entire life." He offered his arm. "But we'll figure it out together." "Yes?" I slipped my hand through his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him. "What if I embarrass you?" "Impossible." "What if I say the wrong thing? Do the wrong thing? What if—" "Kenna," he covered my hand with his. "You could walk into that ballroom and recite nursery rhymes, and I would still be proud to have you beside me. Stop waiting for me to realize you're not enough. You are. You always have been." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to let those words sink in and heal the wounds my family had carved into my sense of self. But words were easy. The ballroom, that would be the test. The grand ballroom was exactly as intimidating as I'd feared. Massive crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Hundreds of wolves in formal attire mingled, their conversations creating a low hum that filled the cavernous space. The air was thick with power alphas, betas, diplomats from neighboring territories, all radiating authority and confidence. And me. The broken omega from nowhere, wearing borrowed elegance and carrying secrets. Every head turned as we entered. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, voices lowering, eyes tracking our progress as Richard led me down the grand staircase. I felt their gazes like physical touches, assessing, judging, cataloging every detail. "Breathe," Richard murmured. "You're doing perfectly." I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I kept my head up and my hand steady on his arm, just like Leanna had coached me. At the bottom of the stairs, we were immediately surrounded. "Your Majesty," a distinguished older male said, bowing slightly. "Wonderful to see you. And this must be?" "This is Kenna," Richard said smoothly, his hand moving to the small of my back. "Kenna, this is Ambassador Rutherford from the Eastern Coalition." "Ambassador." I inclined my head, remembering Liana's instructions about formal greetings. "Charmed," Rutherford said, though his eyes were calculating. "I don't believe I've heard your family name, my dear." "How interesting that you'd ask that," I replied, channeling Liana's advice. "Tell me, Ambassador, how are negotiations with the Eastern Pax progressing?" Richard's hand pressed slightly against my back. "Approval, I thought." Rutherford blinked, then launched into a discussion of trade agreements that I barely followed but nodded along to appropriately. More people approached, more names, more titles, more barely veiled curiosity about who I was and where I'd come from. Richard fielded the invasive questions with diplomatic skill, redirecting conversations whenever someone got too pointed. But I could feel it, the undercurrent of speculation, the whispered conversations happening just out of earshot. "Who is she? Where did she come from? That's his child she's carrying? She doesn't look like much." That last one I definitely heard, from a stunning female in a red dress who was making no effort to hide her disdain. "Lady Sabine," Richard said coolly, acknowledging her with significantly less warmth than he'd shown the others. "How unexpected to see you here, Your Majesty." She practically purred, moving closer, too close. "I wouldn't miss the spring gala, though I must say, I'm surprised by your choice of companion this year. Usually you attend alone, or with someone more established." The insult was barely veiled. I felt my wolf stir, not in strength, but in recognition of threat. "Kenna is exactly where she should be," Richard said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "I suggest you remember that." "Of course." Sabine's smile was razor sharp. "Though one does wonder about bloodlines, family connections, the usual considerations for someone in her position. Carrying the heir, I mean. Surely those details matter?" "The only detail that matters," Richard said, his tone dropping to something dangerous, "is that she's under my protection. Anyone who questions that questions me directly." The nearby conversations fell silent. I realized with dawning horror that we'd become the center of attention, exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. Sabine's eyes glittered with malice disguised as innocence. "I meant no disrespect, Your Majesty. Simply expressing the concerns many of us share. The future heir's mother should be above reproach, shouldn't she?" "She is." Richard's hand moved from my back to my waist, pulling me closer in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. "Now, if you'll excuse us. I believe they're about to announce dinner." He guided me away before I could respond, his jaw tight with anger. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "Sabine has always been one of the females vying for your attention?" I finished quietly. "Liana warned me about her. She's harmless, just bitter that I rejected her marriage alliance 3 years ago." "She doesn't seem harmless." My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline from the confrontation making my pulse race. "She asked all the questions everyone else was thinking. Let them think what they want." He stopped in a quieter corner of the ballroom, turning to face me. "Kenna, I told you your past is yours. You don't owe anyone explanations. But what about our son? When he's born, people are going to demand answers. About my bloodline, my family, why I appeared from nowhere. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That I met you, that we connected, that you're carrying my child. The rest is none of their concern. That won't be enough for them. It has to be." His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone in that gesture I'd come to crave. "Because it's the only answer they're getting." Dinner was an elaborate affair, multiple courses served with formal precision at tables arranged according to rank and status. Richard and I sat at the high table with Lyanna and several other high-ranking pack members. The conversation was political. Careful, every word chosen for maximum diplomacy. I mostly stayed quiet, listening and learning the dynamics at play, but I noticed things. The way people deferred to Richard, how his word ended debates, the burden of authority he carried in every interaction. He was never just a person here, always the king, always on display, always managing competing interests. No wonder he'd been at that border crossing alone, seeking escape. Halfway through the main course, my son decided to make his presence known with a particularly strong kick. I gasped softly, my hand moving instinctively to my stomach. "You all right?" Richard asked immediately, his attention shifting from the ambassador he'd been speaking with. "Fine, he's just active tonight." Something softened in his expression. "May I?" In front of everyone at the high table, in full view of the curious eyes watching our every interaction, I took his hand and placed it where I'd felt the kick. The baby obliged with another strong movement. Richard's face transformed wonder and joy, and something so tender it made my chest ache. He's strong, takes after his father. Around us, I was aware of the reactions, some surprised, some approving, some calculating what this public display of intimacy meant for palace politics. But for that moment, it was just us. Just Richard, me, and the tiny life we'd created. Lyanna caught my eye from across the table and smiled, not her usual sharp smile, but something genuine, approving. Maybe I wasn't doing as badly as I thought. After dinner, the ballroom opened for dancing. A small orchestra played elegant waltzes, and couples took to the floor with practiced grace. "Dance with me," Richard said, offering his hand. "I don't know how," I admitted. "I never learned." "I'll teach you." He pulled me gently to my feet. "It's easy, just follow my lead." He guided me to the dance floor, and I tried not to think about all the eyes watching as he placed one hand at my waist and took my hand in his other. "Step back with your right foot when I step forward with my left," he instructed quietly. "Then side, then together. That's all a waltz is, a simple pattern repeated." He moved, and I tried to follow. Predictably, I stepped on his foot. "Sorry," I muttered. "Don't apologize. Just feel the rhythm." He pulled me closer. "Stop thinking so hard. Let your body follow mine." Easier said than done when I was hyper-aware of every step, every misstep, every judgmental eye tracking our progress. But slowly, gradually, I began to understand the pattern. Step back, side, together. Step back, side, together. Richard's hand at my waist was steady, guiding without forcing. "See?" he murmured. "You're a natural. I'm passable at best. You're dancing with me at the spring gala, pregnant with my child, wearing my grandmother's necklace. I'd say you're doing considerably better than passable." Other couples swirled around us, but I only saw him. The way the chandelier light caught in his amber eyes, the small smile playing at his lips, the protective way he held me, like I was something precious. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For not being ashamed of me. For defending me against Sabine. For this." I gestured vaguely at the ballroom, at us dancing, at everything. "Kenna." He pulled me fractionally closer. "I'm going to tell you something. And I need you to believe me. Can you do that?" "I can try. The night I met you at that border crossing, I'd just come from a council meeting, where 5 different packs presented daughters as potential marriage alliances. 5 beautiful, accomplished, politically connected females who would have been perfect queens." His voice dropped lower. And all I could think was how empty it all felt. How I'd spend my entire life being what everyone needed me to be. The strong king, the strategic leader, the perfect figurehead, never just Richard. Then I met you, and you looked at me like I was a person, asked if I needed someone to listen, offered companionship without agenda or calculation. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My heart was racing. "Richard, I'm not finished." His hand tightened slightly at my waist. "When I found you in that library, pregnant and alone and still fighting, still surviving despite everything that had been done to you, I didn't feel obligation. I felt recognition. Like I'd found the one person who could understand what it's like to be told you're not enough exactly as you are. So no, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm in awe of you. And everyone in this ballroom who thinks you're not worthy can. The music stopped abruptly. Not naturally, violently. Cutting off, mid-phrase. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Screams, shattering glass. And then, unmistakable, the sound of weapons being drawn. Richard's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His hand left my waist, pushing me behind him as his eyes scanned the ballroom with tactical precision. "Stay behind me," he commanded. No longer the male who'd been confessing his feelings, but the alpha king assessing a threat. I saw them, then dark figures in the balconies above, dressed in black, faces covered. At least a dozen, maybe more. And they were armed. "Assassins," someone shouted. The ballroom descended into pandemonium. Guests screaming, running for exits. Palace guards materializing from hidden positions. And through it all, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. The distinctive click of a crossbow, being loaded. Time seemed to slow. I saw the assassin on the far balcony. Saw him aim. Saw exactly where his bolt was pointed. At Richard's back. At my king, who was turned away, focused on threats from the other direction. I didn't think. Didn't plan. Didn't consider the consequences. I shoved Richard sideways with every ounce of strength I had. The bolt whistled through the air where his chest had been a split second before, and buried itself in my shoulder. The pain was instant and blinding. I heard Richard roar, actual wolf roar, that shook the chandeliers, heard the chaos intensify, heard screams. But all I could focus on was the bolt protruding from my shoulder, and the warm wetness spreading across my beautiful emerald dress. "Kenna!" Richard caught me as I fell, his hands frantic, his face pale. "No, no, no. The baby," I gasped. "Is the baby. Don't move. Don't guards. Get Dr. Torres now." Around us, palace guards swarmed the assassins. I heard combat, shouts, the meaty sound of fists connecting with flesh, but it was all distant, muffled beneath the roaring in my ears. Richard was pressing his hand to my shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding, his face twisted with rage and fear. "You pushed me," he said, his voice breaking. "You shoved me out of the way. Why would you? Couldn't let them hurt you," I whispered. Speaking was hard. Everything was hard. "You're pregnant. You should have run, should have protected yourself and our son." I did protect him. By protecting his father. Liana appeared, her dress torn, blood on her hands that I was pretty sure wasn't hers. "Is she? Get everyone out. Lock down the palace. Find every single one of those bastards." Richard's voice was pure command, alpha authority rolling off him in waves. "And somebody get me a doctor right now. I'm here." Dr. Torres materialized with a medical kit, her face grim. "Don't move her. The bolt needs to stay in until I can assess the damage." "The baby," I managed. "Please. Let me work." Her hands moved with efficient precision. "Your Majesty, I need you to step back. I'm not leaving her." "Then hold her hand and stay out of my way." Dr. Torres cut away my dress around the wound, her expression focused. "Kenna, I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me?" I tried to nod, but everything was spinning. "Look at me," Richard commanded, his hand finding mine, squeezing hard enough to ground me. "Kenna, look at me. Stay with me." I focused on his amber eyes, using them as an anchor against the pain and the darkness threatening to pull me under. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice rough. "You fool. You brave, incredible fool. You saved me." "Someone had to," I managed. "Can't have our son growing up without his father. He's not growing up without his mother either." It sounded like a vow, like a command he was giving to the universe itself. "You hear me? You're going to be fine. Both of you are going to be fine." Dr. Torres worked, and I felt her doing something to my shoulder that made me gasp. "Bolt missed the major vessels," she muttered. "Lucky. But I need to get her to the medical wing. Now." Guards appeared with a stretcher. Gentle hands lifted me, and I bit back a scream as my shoulder protested. Richard kept hold of my hand the entire way, walking beside the stretcher, his presence the only thing keeping me tethered to consciousness. "The baby," I whispered as they moved me through the corridors. "Dr. Torres, please. I'll check as soon as we stabilize you." "But Kenna, you saved the Alpha King's life. You're a hero." Hero. The word seemed wrong. Heroes were strong, capable, worthy. I was just a broken Omega who'd acted on instinct. But as darkness finally claimed me, I heard Richard's voice one more time. "I love you. Do you hear me, Kenna? I love you. So you don't get to die. You don't get to leave me now that I've finally found you." And even through the pain and the fear, those words wrapped around my heart and held on tight. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. I woke to white ceiling tiles and the antiseptic smell of the medical wing. My shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a dull, persistent ache that radiated down my arm. But I was alive, breathing, conscious, and my hand was resting on my stomach, where another hand covered it, warm and large and familiar. Richard. He was asleep in a chair pulled up beside my bed, his head resting on the mattress near my hip, his hand protectively covering mine over where our son grew. His formal jacket was gone, his shirt rumpled and stained with blood. My blood. I tried to move, and the slight shift made him jerk awake instantly, his eyes finding mine with desperate intensity. "Kenna." My name was a prayer, a sob, a demand all at once. "You're awake. Thank the gods you're awake." "How long?" My voice was rough, my throat dry. 18 hours. He stood, his hand never leaving mine. "Dr. Torres had to remove the bolt, repair the damage. You lost a lot of blood." His voice cracked. "She said if the bolt had been 2 inches to the left, it would have hit your lung. If you hadn't turned exactly the way you did. But I did." I squeezed his hand weakly. "Richard, the baby. Is he?" "He's fine." The relief in his voice was palpable. Strong heartbeat, still moving. Dr. Torres checked multiple times. "He's a fighter, just like his mother." The tension I'd been holding since the moment the bolt struck finally released. My son was safe. That was all that mattered. "You shouldn't have done it," Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. "You were pregnant, vulnerable. You should have run. Should have protected yourself. I did what I had to do. You could have died." He leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cut my face with devastating gentleness. "Kenna, you could have died, and our son could have died, and I would have lost both of you because I was too busy playing king to see the threat. It wasn't your fault. It was absolutely my fault." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the guilt carved into every line of his face. "I brought you into this world, put you on display, made you a target by association, and you paid the price for my arrogance. Richard, I love you." The words tumbled out like he'd been holding them back too long. "I told you while you were unconscious, but I need you to hear it while you're awake. I need you to know that this isn't about duty or obligation or our son. I love you. I've been falling for you since that night at the border crossing, and finding you again only made it impossible to deny." My heart stuttered. "You don't have to say that just because I got hurt. I'm not saying it because you got hurt. I'm saying it because I almost lost you without ever telling you the truth." He pressed his forehead to mine. "You pushed me out of the way of that bolt. You saved my life without hesitation. And all I could think as I watched you fall was that I'd never told you how much you mean to me. How you're not just the mother of my child, you're the woman who made me remember what it's like to be human." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm broken, Richard. My wolf is weak. My bloodline is nothing. My family threw me away like trash. Your wolf is quiet, not weak. Your bloodline doesn't define your worth. And your family were fools who couldn't see what they had." His voice was fierce. "You are brave and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. You survived abandonment, homelessness, pregnancy alone. You walked into a ballroom full of wolves who judged you and held your head high. And when danger came, you didn't run, you stepped in front of a bolt meant for me, because I couldn't let them hurt you. Why?" He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. "Why risk everything for me?" The answer was there. had been growing since that night at the border, blooming in the library when he'd looked at me with wonder, taking root during quiet evenings in my rooms when he'd made me feel seen for the first time in my life. "Because I love you too," I whispered. "I think I have since you told me I was perfect, and shouldn't let anyone tell me otherwise. Since you looked at my broken wolf and saw something waiting instead of something wrong. Since you—" He kissed me, gentle, careful of my injuries, but thorough. Like he was trying to memorize the taste of me, the feel of me, the reality that I was alive and here and his. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "When this is over," he said roughly, "when you're healed and strong again, I'm going to ask you properly. With a ring and a formal proposal and all the ceremony you deserve. But Kenna, I need you to know, you're not temporary. You're not a complication I'm managing. You're the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life. Even though I'm nobody? You're not nobody. You're mine." He kissed my forehead. "And I'm yours. If you'll have me." Before I could answer, the door opened and Dr. Torres entered, followed by Liana. "You're awake," Dr. Torres said, her expression professionally pleased. "Good. Let me check your vitals." Liana hung back, her arms crossed, but I saw the relief in her eyes. "You scared us, Kenna. Pushing Richard like that, it was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Both, probably," I admitted. "Definitely both." But she smiled. "The whole palace is talking about it. How you threw yourself in front of the Alpha King. How you saved his life without hesitation. You're a hero." "I'm not." "You are," Richard interrupted firmly. "Whether you accept it or not." Dr. Torres finished her examination, nodding with satisfaction. "Vitals are good. Wound is healing well, should be fully recovered in a few weeks with proper rest. The baby is absolutely fine, showing no signs of distress." "You're incredibly lucky, Kenna." "When can she leave the medical wing?" Richard asked. "Another day for observation, then bed rest in her rooms for at least a week. No strenuous activity, plenty of fluids, and someone needs to monitor her for infection." "I'll do it," Richard said immediately. Dr. Torres raised an eyebrow. "Your Majesty, you have responsibilities, which can wait." His tone left no room for argument. "My priorities are right here." After Dr. Torres left, Liana approached the bed. "I should let you rest, but I wanted to say thank you for saving my brother. He's an arrogant, stubborn bastard, but he's my arrogant, stubborn bastard." "Hey," Richard protested mildly. She ignored him, her eyes on me. "You proved everyone wrong last night, Kenna. Every person who doubted you, who questioned whether you belonged, they saw exactly what you're made of, and they won't forget it." "Did they catch them?" I asked. "The assassins?" Her expression darkened. "Most of them. A few escaped, but we're tracking them. They were hired by a rival faction trying to destabilize Richard's rule. Foolish, desperate, and ultimately unsuccessful. Because of Kenna," Richard added quietly. "If that bolt had hit its mark, but it didn't." Liana squeezed my uninjured shoulder gently. "Rest, heal. And when you're stronger, we'll talk about how the palace is going to formally recognize what you did." After she left, silence settled over the room. Richard returned to his chair, his hand finding mine again. "You should go," I said softly. "You must have things to do. The kingdom doesn't stop because the kingdom can wait." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Right now, the only thing that matters is you." The next 2 days passed in a haze of healing and quiet conversations. Richard barely left my side, conducting necessary meetings from my medical room, signing documents while sitting in the chair beside my bed, making it clear to everyone that his priority was me. The palace staff treated me differently now. Where before they'd been polite but distant, now they were warm, genuine. The guards nodded respectfully when they passed. The nurses called me my lady, with real deference. I'd saved their king. That single act had earned me a place I'd never been able to claim through bloodline or pack affiliation. On the 3rd day, Dr. Torres cleared me to return to my rooms with strict instructions about rest and limitations. Richard insisted on pushing the wheelchair himself, despite my protests that I could walk. "Humor me," he said. "I almost lost you. Let me be overprotective for a while." My rooms felt different now, not just a temporary shelter, but actually mine. Richard had flowers delivered, had the staff bring meals we could share, spent hours simply sitting with me while I read or rested. It was during one of these quiet evenings, a week after the attack, that he brought up the future. "I meant what I said," he started, setting aside the report he'd been reviewing, "about proposing properly, about wanting you beside me permanently, Richard. But I realize I've been making decisions for you again, assuming what you want instead of asking." He moved to sit on the couch beside me. "So, I'm asking now. What do you want, Kenna? Not what you think I want to hear, not what you think you're supposed to want. What do you want?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I want our son to grow up knowing he's loved," I said slowly. "I want him to never feel like he's not enough, the way I felt my entire life. I paused, gathering courage. "I want to stop being afraid that this is temporary. That one day you'll realize I'm not worth the complications I bring. That's never going to happen. You can't promise that." "Yes, I can." He took my hand. "Kenna, you walked into a ballroom full of wolves who judged you and held your head high. You danced with me despite never having learned. You threw yourself in front of a crossbow bolt to save my life. If that's not enough to prove your worth, then nothing ever will be, and the problem isn't you. It's everyone else being blind. Your court still doesn't know where I came from, who I am. Do you want to tell them? Did I? The story of my rejection, my family's abandonment, the shame that had defined my entire life. No, I admitted. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Is that wrong? It's your story to tell or keep. No one else gets to demand it." He squeezed my hand. "But Kenna, I need you to understand something. When I ask you to marry me, and I will ask, properly, when you're healed, I'm not asking because of our son. I'm not asking because you saved my life. I'm asking because I can't imagine my future without you in it. Even though I'm broken, you're not broken. He struggled for words. "You're like those books you love so much. The ones that have been read hundreds of times, with worn covers and dog-eared pages. They're not broken, they're loved. They're proof that something precious has been held and cherished and turned to again and again." The metaphor shouldn't have worked. It was too simple, too neat. But it cracked something open in my chest anyway. "I don't know how to be a queen," I whispered. "I don't need a queen. I need a partner. Someone who sees me. Not just the crown. Someone who makes me want to be better." He cupped my face. "That's you, Kenna. It's always been you." 2 weeks after the attack, I was finally cleared for light activity. My shoulder was healing well, the scar a reminder of that night, but nothing that would impair movement long term. Richard had been true to his word. He'd barely left my side, rearranging his schedule, conducting business from my rooms when necessary. But I could see the strain it was putting on him, the way responsibilities were piling up. "You need to go back to regular duties," I said one morning over breakfast. "I'm fine. You're exhausted. And the kingdom needs its king, not a nursemaid." He smiled slightly. "Calling me a nursemaid? A very devoted, very overprotective nursemaid." I reached across the table to take his hand. "I'm healing, Richard. The baby is fine. You've proven you're not going anywhere. Now, go be the Alpha King. Only if you come with me." I blinked. "What?" "To the strategy meetings, the diplomatic sessions. Not everything. I'm not putting you in danger again. But the routine things, the boring administrative work. Come sit beside me. Let the court see us together. Show them that you're not hiding anymore. I'm not qualified to. You're intelligent, observant, and you see things from a perspective no one else in that room has. You're more qualified than you think." He stood, pulling me gently to my feet. "Besides, our son should get used to hearing policy discussions. Start his political education early." Despite myself, I laughed. "He's not even born yet. Never too early to start." But his expression turned serious. "I'm not asking you to be something you're not, Kenna. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, my partner, my equal, the woman I love. And that woman deserves a place beside me, not hidden away, not protected to the point of isolation, beside me." I thought about Liana's words, about proving I belonged, about the way the palace staff now treated me with genuine respect. Maybe I'd never be the perfect queen from a powerful bloodline with an impressive wolf. Maybe I'd always be the broken Omega who'd clawed her way up from nothing. But maybe that was exactly what this kingdom needed. Someone who understood what it was like to be discarded, to be judged unworthy, to fight for every scrap of dignity and belonging. "Okay," I said, "I'll come with you." The smile that broke across his face was worth every risk. The first council meeting I attended was smaller than I'd feared, just Richard, Leanna, 3 senior advisors, and me. They were discussing trade routes and tax policies, practical matters that had nothing to do with drama or intrigue. I sat beside Richard and mostly listened, but occasionally he'd turn to me and ask my opinion, not patronizing, not testing, genuinely wanting my perspective. "What do you think about the proposed tariff reduction?" he asked during a discussion about border trade. I hesitated, aware of all eyes on me. I think if you reduce tariffs, you need to make sure the humans who rely on that border trade for their livelihoods aren't displaced. They don't have PAC support systems. They can't just shift territories if their business fails." One of the advisors frowned. "The humans aren't really our concern. They should be," I interrupted quietly. "Because when humans suffer, they get desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. Better to include them in the solution than create a new problem." Silence. I immediately regretted speaking. Then Richard nodded. "She's right. Add provisions for human merchant protections to the proposal." "Kenna, anything else?" Over the next hour, they asked my opinion 3 more times, and each time, my perspective shaped by having lived among humans, by understanding what it was like to have no PAC protection, added something the council hadn't considered. When the meeting ended, Leanna pulled me aside. "You're good at this," she said bluntly. "The political strategy, the seeing angles others miss. My brother chose well. I'm just offering common sense. Common sense is surprisingly rare in politics." She smiled. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing, Kenna. You're making a difference." That night, in the quiet of my rooms with Richard beside me, I finally let myself believe it, that I belonged here. Not despite my broken past, but because of it. That being the woman from nowhere gave me perspective others lacked. That loving the Alpha King didn't make me weak, it made me brave enough to step in front of crossbow bolts. "What are you thinking?" Richard asked, his hand resting on my stomach where our son slept. "That maybe your grandmother's necklace was right." "About what?" "That emeralds are the color of hope." I turned to face him. I spent my whole life believing I was broken, that I was worth less than others because my wolf was quiet, because my family rejected me, because I didn't fit the mold. But maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just waiting. For what? For this. For you. For a place where being different wasn't the same as being wrong. I covered his hand with mine. For hope. He kissed me then, gentle and thorough, like I was the most precious thing in his world. And for the first time in my life, I believed I might be. Chapter 7. The Hunt for Truth. 3 weeks after the assassination attempt, Richard came to my rooms with a file folder and an expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he'd discovered something I wasn't going to like. "We found something," he said without preamble, setting the folder on the table between us. "About the assassins, about who hired them and why." My hand moved instinctively to my healing shoulder. "And? They were hired by a coalition of 3 PAC's border territories that have been discontent with certain policies. They saw killing me as a way to destabilize the Northern Throne, create a power vacuum they could exploit. That doesn't sound like something you need to tell me privately. That's not the part you need to hear." He sat across from me, his expression carefully controlled. "Kenna, one of those PACs, one of the families involved in funding the assassination, was the Blythe PAC." The name hit me like a physical blow. "My family? Your father specifically. He contributed a significant sum to the coalition. Not the largest donor, but enough to show clear intent." Richard's voice was gentle but firm. "Your family tried to have me killed. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. My father, the man who'd raised me, who'd called me worthless, who'd thrown me out, had paid money to have Richard assassinated. Which meant, if that bolt had found its mark, I would have lost everything. The man I loved, the father of my child, my future, because of my own blood. Kenna. Richard moved to kneel beside my chair, taking my cold hands in his. Breathe. Just breathe. They tried to kill you, I whispered. My family tried to kill you. And if I hadn't pushed you. If that bolt had. But it didn't. You saved me. That's what matters. Did they know? The question tore out of me. Did they know I was here? That I was with you? We don't think so. The planning started months ago. Before I even found you at the library. This wasn't personal, it was political opportunism. They saw a chance to back a play for power, and they took it. Somehow that made it worse. Not that they'd targeted him because of me, but that they'd done it anyway. That my father had looked at the Alpha King, the male whose child I carried, whose life I'd built around, and decided he was worth killing for political gain. What happens now? I asked quietly. Richard's jaw tightened. Now, I have to respond. The families involved are being arrested, tried for treason. The evidence is overwhelming: financial records, communications, testimony from captured assassins. They'll be found guilty. And the punishment for treason? Execution or permanent exile. Pack dissolution. Assets seized. His hands squeezed mine. Kenna, I'm sorry. I know they rejected you, but they're still your family. If you want me to show mercy. No. The word came out harder than I intended. No mercy. He studied me carefully. You're sure? They threw me out when I needed them most. They valued political alliances over their own daughter, and now they've tried to kill the father of my child, to destroy the life I've built, to take away the one person who's ever made me feel like I matter. I met his eyes. If you show them mercy, you show weakness. And I won't be the reason you're seen as weak. This isn't about appearances, Kenna. This is about what you can live with. I thought about my father's hand cracking across my face. My mother looking through me like I was already gone. Vivienne's pitying expression as she told me I'd ruined everything. I can live with justice, I said finally. What I can't live with is them escaping consequences while I spent weeks homeless and afraid, because they decided I was disposable. Richard stood, pulling me up with him, his arms coming around me carefully, mindful of my still healing shoulder. I love you, he murmured against my hair. And I'm sorry this is happening. That your family is. They stopped being my family the day they disowned me. I pulled back enough to look at him. You're my family now. You and our son. That's what matters. The trial was swift and public, as was custom for treason cases. Richard offered to keep me away from it, to spare me the pain of watching my former pack face justice. But I needed to see it. Needed to witness the end of that chapter of my life. Liana sat beside me in the observation gallery, her presence a silent support. Below, in the formal hearing chamber, my father stood with the other accused 12 wolves from 3 different packs, all linked to the assassination plot. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer, but his expression was the same, hard, unyielding, convinced of his own righteousness. The evidence was presented methodically. Financial transfers, encrypted messages, testimony from captured assassins who'd been offered immunity in exchange for cooperation. My father didn't deny it, didn't show remorse. When asked why he'd participated, he said simply, the Alpha King's policies were weakening border packs. Someone had to act. No mention of me. No recognition that his daughter was in the room, that I'd been the one to save Richard's life, that his actions had nearly destroyed me. I was still invisible to him. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, permanent exile beyond Northern Territory borders, pack dissolution, all assets seized. Not execution. Richard had chosen the more merciful option, despite my earlier words, because he was a better person than I was. As the accused were led away, my father's eyes swept the observation gallery. For one brief moment, they landed on me. Recognition flickered. Shock. Then something that might have been shame, quickly buried beneath his usual stoicism. He opened his mouth like he might say something. But the guards moved him along, and the moment passed. I would never know what he might have said. And I realized, with startling clarity, that I didn't care. Liana's hand found mine. You okay? Yes. And surprisingly, I meant it. I'm okay. That evening, Richard found me in the palace library, the real one, massive and beautiful, filled with more books than I could read in a lifetime. "How are you?" he asked, settling beside me on the window seat. "Better than I expected." I set down the book I'd been pretending to read. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved? That I'm not sad about the verdict?" "No, it's not wrong." He pulled me against his side, careful of my shoulder. "They hurt you, Kenna," repeatedly. "You don't owe them grief. My sister Vivienne wasn't involved. The investigation cleared her." "I know. If you want to reach out to her." "I don't." I leaned into his warmth. "She made her choice when she watched them throw me out and did nothing. I can't. I can't forgive that. Not yet. Maybe not ever." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set through the library windows. "There's something else," Richard said finally. "Something I need to tell you, and you're not going to like it." My stomach tightened. "What?" "The assassination attempt. The planning. The coordination. It wasn't just political opportunism. Someone inside the palace helped them, provided information about my schedule, security protocols, which entrances to use. A traitor. Inside Richard's own household. Do you know who?" "Not yet, but we're investigating. In the meantime, security is being increased, especially around you." "Around me? Kenna, you saved my life. You're carrying my heir. If there's a traitor who wants to destabilize my rule, you're now the most valuable target they could hit." His arm tightened around me. "I won't take chances with your safety, or our sons." The weight of it settled over me, the constant danger, the political maneuvering, the reality that loving the Alpha King meant accepting that people would always see me as a tool to be used or eliminated. "I won't hide again," I said firmly. "I can't spend the rest of my life locked in rooms, afraid of shadows. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to be careful. To let the guards do their jobs. To..." He stopped, frustration evident. "I almost lost you once. I can't go through that again." "You won't." I turned to face him. "Because I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not when we've just started figuring this out." He kissed me then, desperate and claiming, like he needed the physical proof that I was here, alive, his. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "Marry me," he whispered. "What?" "I know, I said I'd ask properly, with ceremony and planning. But I can't wait anymore. Marry me, Kenna. Not because of our son, not because you saved my life, but because I love you and I want the world to know you're mine." My heart was racing. "Richard, you don't have to answer now. Think about it, but know that I mean it. Every word." He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. "I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want our son to grow up seeing parents who chose each other, who fought for each other. I want..." "Yes." He stopped mid-sentence. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." The words came easier than I expected, felt right in a way nothing in my life ever had. "I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want..." My voice caught. "I want to be chosen. Really chosen. And you're the first person who's ever made me feel like I was worth choosing." The smile that broke across his face was incandescent. He kissed me again, slower this time, thorough and reverent. "I'm going to make you so happy," he promised. "I swear it. You already have." The engagement announcement happened 2 days later, a formal declaration read in the palace and sent to every pack in the Northern Territory. His Majesty, Alpha King Richard Werner, is pleased to announce his betrothal to Lady Kenna, who carries the heir to the Northern throne. The union will be formalized in 6 weeks' time. All are invited to celebrate. Lady Kenna. He'd given me a title, a formal recognition that made me something other than the woman from nowhere. The response was mixed. Congratulations poured in from some quarters packs loyal to Richard, diplomats who valued stability, wolves who'd witnessed me save the king's life and saw the political wisdom in the match. But there were objections too. Whispers about my unknown bloodline, questions about whether I was truly worthy, speculation about whether this was a political move or genuine affection. Leanna addressed it directly one afternoon, while we were planning the ceremony. "Let them talk," she said, reviewing flower arrangements with brutal efficiency. In 6 months, when you're the queen and our nephew is born, none of it will matter. You'll have proven yourself in ways they can't argue with. What if I can't? I asked. What if I'm not good at this, at being queen, at leading, at all of it? Then you'll learn. Just like Richard did. Just like every ruler before him. She looked up from the flowers. You saved the king's life, Kenna. You've already proven you have the courage for this role. Everything else is just details. Details. Like learning court protocol, understanding pack politics, navigating the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the Northern Territory. Like figuring out how to be a mother while also being a queen. Like discovering how to hold on to myself while fulfilling expectations I'd never imagined I'd face. 3 weeks before the wedding, my son decided to make his presence dramatically known. I was in a council meeting, becoming a regular occurrence now, when a particularly strong kick made me gasp audibly. The entire room fell silent. Apologies, I said, one hand pressed to my stomach. He's just very active today. Richard's hand immediately covered mine, concern evident. Do you need to leave? Should I call Dr. Torres? No, I'm fine. He's just there. Did you feel that? The kick was strong enough that Richard's eyes widened. Around the table, I saw various expressions, amusement, fondness, and from a few of the older advisors, approval. That's a strong pup, one of them commented. Takes after his father. Or his mother, another added. Lady Kenna did throw herself in front of a crossbow bolt. That takes considerable strength. It was the first time any of them had openly acknowledged what I'd done. The first time they'd treated me as more than just Richard's choice, but as someone who'd earned respect in my own right. The meeting continued, but something had shifted. I was no longer just the pregnant woman sitting beside the king. I was the expectant mother of the heir, the one who'd saved their king, the future queen. I was becoming real to them. That night, alone with Richard in the chambers that had become ours, he'd moved his things into my rooms weeks ago. Unable to bear the separation, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. What if I'm not enough? I whispered into the darkness. What if, after all this, I fail? What if I'm not the queen they need? Not the mother our son deserves? Not— Stop. Richard pulled me closer, his hand splaying protectively over my swollen belly. You're already more than enough. You just can't see it yet. How can you be so sure? Because I know you. I've watched you survive things that would have broken lesser wolves. I've seen you face down judgmental courtiers with quiet grace. I've felt you save my life without a second's hesitation. He pressed a kiss to my temple. You're not perfect, Kenna, but you're real. You're honest. You're kind when you have every reason to be bitter. And that is exactly what this kingdom needs. I'm still afraid. Good. Fear keeps us careful, keeps us from becoming arrogant. His hand moved in gentle circles on my stomach. But don't let fear tell you you're not worthy. You are. You always have been. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to silence the voices in my head that still sounded like my father, like my old pack, like every wolf who'd ever told me I was less than. But belief, I was learning, was something built slowly, one choice at a time, one moment of courage stacked on another. I'd chosen to save Richard's life. I'd chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. I'd chosen to love him, despite every risk. And now, I was choosing to become his queen. Not because I was certain I could do it, but because he believed I could. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. 3 weeks, I murmured. 3 weeks until the wedding. Getting cold feet? Terrified feet. But I'm not running. Good. His arms tightened around me. Because I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. Outside, the moon rose over the palace grounds, silver light spilling through our windows. And inside, wrapped in the arms of the man I loved, carrying the future of the Northern Territory, I finally let myself believe in tomorrow. Even if I still wasn't sure I believed in myself. The next morning, I woke to find Richard already gone. Early morning security briefing, according to the note he'd left. But there was something else on my bedside table. A small velvet box. Inside was a ring not ostentatious, but beautiful. A single diamond set in platinum, with tiny emeralds flanking it on either side, and a note in his handwriting. I know I already asked. But you deserve the ring too. The emeralds are for hope. The diamond is for forever. I love you, D. I slipped the ring onto my finger, watching it catch the morning light. 3 weeks until I became Queen Kenna of the Northern Territory. 3 weeks until I stepped into a role I'd never been prepared for, never expected, never believed I deserved. But I was done waiting for permission to claim my place. Done apologizing for being broken. Done believing the lies my family had told me about my worth. I was Kenna, mother of the future heir, savior of the Alpha King, survivor of abandonment and homelessness and assassination attempts, and I was going to be a queen, even if I had to figure out how one step at a time. Chapter 8. The Wedding and Revelation. The morning of my wedding, I woke before dawn with my son doing acrobatics against my ribs. 7 months pregnant now, my belly pronounced and impossible to hide. Dominic had designed a wedding dress that accommodated it beautifully, flowing ivory silk that draped elegantly, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. It was nothing like the traditional wedding gowns I'd seen in books, stiff and formal and uncomfortable. This was soft, ethereal, made for a pregnant bride who'd never imagined she'd have a wedding at all. Liana arrived at sunrise with a team of assistants, all business-like efficiency masking what I suspected was actual sentiment. "Big day," she said, directing traffic as hairstylists and makeup artists swarmed my rooms. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm going to throw up." "Morning sickness or nerves?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." I pressed a hand to my stomach, where my son had finally settled. "Liana, what if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing during the ceremony? Or trip walking down the aisle? Or, then you'll be human, which is better than being perfect." She sat beside me, uncharacteristically gentle. "Kenna, I'm going to tell you something my grandmother told me before she died. She said that being royal isn't about being flawless, it's about being willing to try anyway, knowing everyone is watching, knowing you'll make mistakes. It's about choosing to show up even when you're terrified." "Were you ever terrified?" "Constantly. Still am, most days." She squeezed my hand. "But I show up anyway, and so will you." The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. My hair was styled in loose waves, pinned with flowers that matched the ones Richard and I had picked together, forget-me-nots, because I'd laughed and said they were fitting for someone who'd been forgotten her entire life. He'd kissed me and said he'd never forget me, not for a single moment. The makeup was subtle, just enough to enhance, not transform. I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked confident, regal, like someone who belonged in a palace. "Ready?" Liana asked as Dominic made final adjustments to the dress. "No, but let's do this anyway." The ceremony was being held in the palace's formal gardens, under a canopy of spring blooms. Hundreds of guests filled the space pack leaders, diplomats, nobles, palace staff. Everyone who mattered in the Northern Territory had come to witness their king take a queen. To witness me, the broken Omega from nowhere, claim a place I'd never been meant to have. I waited at the garden entrance, my hand resting on my belly, trying to remember how to breathe. There was no one to walk me down the aisle. No father to give me away. No family to stand witness. For a moment, the loneliness of it threatened to overwhelm me. Then Liana appeared at my side. "May I?" she asked quietly. "Walk with you? I know I'm not family by blood, but you're more family than anyone I've ever had." My voice cracked. "Yes, please." She linked her arm through mine, and together we stepped into view. The music swelled. Every head turned, and there, at the end of the aisle beneath the floral canopy, stood Richard. He was devastating in formal ceremonial attire, black and silver, the colors of the Northern Throne. But it was his expression that made my chest tight. The way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world, like every step I took toward him was a miracle. I focused on him as I walked, on the love in his eyes, on the future we were building together, on the tiny life growing inside me that was half him, half me, all ours. When we reached the canopy, Liana placed my hand in Richard's and stepped back. His fingers threaded through mine, warm and steady. "You're beautiful," he whispered, "just for me. You're biased. Completely." He smiled. "And I don't care." The officiant, an elder wolf named Grayson, who'd served the Northern Throne for decades, began the ceremony. Traditional words about bonding and commitment, about the responsibilities of leadership and partnership. But when it came time for our personal vows, Richard's words were anything but traditional. "Kenna," he said, his voice carrying across the garden. "The night I met you, I was running. From duty, from expectations, from the weight of being everything everyone needed me to be. And you looked at me like I was just a person, like I mattered beyond my title. You gave me something I'd been searching for my entire life, the chance to be seen." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "You've survived things that should have broken you. You've faced judgment and rejection, and still chose kindness. You saved my life without hesitation. And you've given me the greatest gift, the chance to build a future with someone who understands what it means to fight for belonging. I promise to protect you, to honor you, to never make you feel like you're not enough. I promise to love our son the way you deserve to be loved, unconditionally, completely. And I promise to choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. Not because I have to, because I want to." Tears were streaming down my face. Liana pressed a handkerchief into my hand, and I heard several women in the audience sniffling. Then, it was my turn. "Richard," I started, my voice shaking. "I spent my whole life believing I was broken, that my quiet wolf made me less than, that being different meant being wrong. And then you looked at me and saw strength where I only saw weakness. You saw waiting instead of malformed. You saw worth where I'd been taught to see shame." I squeezed his hands, drawing courage from his presence. "You didn't save me. I was already saving myself. But you gave me a reason to keep fighting. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. And you loved me exactly as I am, without asking me to be someone else. I promised to stand beside you, not behind you. To be your partner in everything. I promised to raise our son to be kind and brave, and to know that being different isn't the same as being less. And I promised to love you not because you're a king, but because you're you. The man who asked if I needed someone to listen. The man who built me a library. The man who chose me when I'd been unchosen my entire life." My voice dropped to a whisper, but in the garden's silence, everyone heard. "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for making me believe I was worth loving." The officiant cleared his throat, clearly moved. "By the power vested in me by the Northern Territory and its ancient traditions, I declare you bonded in matrimony. Your Majesty, you may." Richard didn't wait for permission. He pulled me close and kissed me, careful of my belly, but thorough enough to leave no doubt about his feelings. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. When we pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. "My queen," he murmured. "Your wife," I corrected, smiling through tears. "Both, always both." The reception was everything the ceremony had been, and more: music, dancing, endless courses of food, toasts from what felt like every person in the Northern Territory. Liana gave a speech that was surprisingly heartfelt, talking about how I'd proven myself worthy not through bloodline but through character. Several pack leaders offered congratulations, their earlier skepticism apparently replaced with acceptance. But it was Dr. Torres who pulled me aside during the dancing, her expression serious. "I need to examine you," she said quietly. "Nothing's wrong yet. But you've been on your feet for hours. You're 7 months pregnant, and I can see you're exhausted. Let me check you over before you collapse." She wasn't wrong. My feet ached. My back was screaming. And my son had been kicking like he was trying to escape for the past hour. Richard noticed me being led away and immediately followed. "Is she all right?" "She's fine. Just needs rest and a checkup." This is what happens when you throw a 5-hour wedding for a heavily pregnant woman. Torres shooed him toward the door. "Give us 20 minutes. Go play king. I want him here," I said quickly. "Please." Dr. Torres raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Fine. But stay out of my way." The examination was routine: blood pressure, fetal heartbeat, checking for signs of early labor or distress. But halfway through, Dr. Torres paused, her hand on my belly, her expression thoughtful. "What?" I asked nervously. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. But..." She pressed gently on my lower abdomen, and I felt my son kick in response. "Your wolf. I'm feeling her." I blinked. "What?" "Your wolf," She's there stronger than I've sensed before. The pregnancy has been awakening her gradually. I'd suspected it, but now I'm certain. Doctor, Torres met my eyes. Kenna, your wolf was never malformed. She was dormant, waiting. Waiting for what? For the right circumstances, the right catalyst. She glanced at Richard. Or the right mate. Richard moved closer, his hand finding mine. Are you saying? I'm saying that bonding with the Alpha King, carrying his child, it's been triggering changes in Kenna's wolf. She's not broken. She's just been asleep. And now, she's waking up. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. I'd spent 23 years being told my wolf was defective, that she'd never be strong, that I'd always be less than. I don't understand, I whispered. Some wolves need the right conditions to emerge fully, Doctor, Torres explained. Extreme stress or extreme safety, life-threatening situations or deep emotional bonds. You've experienced both in the past few months. Your wolf has been responding. Can she shift? Richard asked, his voice intense. Is it safe for her to try? Not until after the baby is born. Shifting while pregnant is dangerous. But after? Dr. Torres smiled. I suspect Kenna is going to surprise a lot of people, including herself. The revelation echoed in my head for the rest of the reception. My wolf wasn't broken. She'd been dormant. Waiting for Richard, for our son, for circumstances that made her feel safe enough to emerge. It changed everything, and nothing simultaneously. I was still the same person who'd been rejected by her family, who'd lived in a shelter, who'd clawed her way to this moment. But maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as I'd always believed. Later, when the guests had finally dispersed, and Richard and I were alone in our chambers, no longer my rooms, but officially ours now, he held me carefully, mindful of my exhaustion and our son between us. How do you feel? He asked. About what Dr. Torres said. Confused, hopeful, scared. I pressed closer to him. What if she's wrong? What if my wolf stays quiet even after the baby is born? Then nothing changes. You're still you, the woman I love, the queen I chose, the mother of my child. Your wolf's strength doesn't determine your worth, Kenna. You've already proven that. But if she's right, if my wolf emerges, then everyone who ever said you were broken will be proven wrong. He kissed my forehead. But you already knew they were wrong, didn't you? I thought about it. About everything I'd survived. About the strength it had taken to keep going when I had nothing. About pushing Richard out of the way of a crossbow bolt without hesitation. Maybe, I admitted. Maybe I am stronger than they said. You definitely are. His hand moved to my belly, where our son had finally settled into sleep. And he's going to grow up knowing it, knowing that his mother was brave and resilient, and fought for her place when everyone said she didn't belong. I still can't believe this is real sometimes, I confessed. That I'm married to you, that I'm a queen, that this isn't just some dream I'm going to wake up from. It's real. He tightened his arms around me. I'm real. Our son is real. This us, it's the most real thing I've ever known. We lay in silence for a while, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to us both. Richard? I murmured, as sleep threatened to pull me under. Thank you. For choosing me. For seeing past all the broken pieces. Kenna. His voice was firm, drawing me back from sleep. You were never broken. You were just a masterpiece that no one else knew how to appreciate. But I do. And I always will. 2 days after the wedding, the traitor was found. Not someone I'd expected, not a guard or an advisor, or anyone with obvious access, but a junior member of the household staff, a beta wolf named Thomas who'd worked in the palace for 3 years, invisible and unremarkable. He'd been feeding information to the assassination coalition, in exchange for promised power once Richard was eliminated. Schedule details, security protocols, the layout of the spring gala. He'd been the one who told them exactly when and where to strike. Richard brought me to the interrogation not because I needed to be there, but because he'd promised transparency. No more secrets. No more decisions made without including me. Thomas barely looked at me, his eyes fixed on Richard with a mixture of fear and defiance. Why? Richard asked, his voice dangerously quiet. You had position, respect, a place here. Why betray that? Because you're weak, Thomas spat. Caring about humans, making alliances with packs that should be beneath us, choosing her. He finally looked at me, disgust evident, over proper nobility. You're not the king we need, so you tried to have me killed. I tried to give us a chance at a real leader, someone who understands power. Richard was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Power without wisdom is just violence. Strength without compassion is just cruelty. You didn't try to give the territory a better leader, you tried to plunge us into chaos for your own advancement. He stood, signaling to the guards. Life imprisonment, no possibility of parole. He betrayed his king, endangered the queen, and nearly destroyed everything this territory stands for. Let him spend the rest of his days understanding the consequences of his choices. As Thomas was led away, still defiant and unrepentant, I felt a strange sense of closure. The threat was contained, the traitor exposed, the danger, for now, was past. "Are you all right?" Richard asked, his hand finding mine. Yes, and I meant it. I'm all right, because I wasn't the frightened, broken Omega anymore. I was Queen Kenna of the Northern Territory, wife to the Alpha King, mother to be of the Heir, and I was finally, truly, home. The weeks following the wedding settled into a new rhythm. I attended council meetings regularly now, my input valued and sought. I met with pack representatives, mediated minor disputes, learned the intricacies of governance that came with being queen, and I felt my wolf stirring more each day, not dramatically, not shifting or emerging, but present, a constant hum beneath my skin, growing stronger as my pregnancy progressed. Dr. Torres monitored it carefully, fascinated by the phenomenon. "I've never seen anything quite like this," she admitted during one examination. "Your wolf's awakening is tied directly to your emotional state. The more secure you feel, the stronger she becomes. What does that mean for after the birth? It means you might be capable of shifting for the first time in your life. Full shifting, not the incomplete transformations you've experienced before." She smiled. "Your son might just give you the gift of your wolf." How's that for irony? 8 months pregnant now, I was large and uncomfortable and counting down the days until I could meet my son. Until I could hold him in my arms instead of just feeling his kicks. Richard was hovering constantly, endearingly overprotective, insisting I rest more, worrying if I so much as winced. It should have been annoying, but mostly it was sweet. "I'm not made of glass," I told him one evening as he fussed over my pillows for the 3rd time. "I know. You're made of steel and stubbornness, but humor me anyway." He sat beside me, his hand moving to my belly where our son was currently trying out his best kickboxing moves. "He's active tonight. He's active every night, takes after his father's inability to sit still, or his mother's determination to prove she doesn't need help, even when she does." He leaned down, speaking directly to my stomach. "Your mother is the most stubborn woman alive, just so you know what you're in for." Our son kicked in response, and we both laughed. These moments, simple, domestic, utterly ordinary, were more precious to me than any crown or title. This was what I'd been searching for my entire life without knowing it. Not power, not status, not validation from wolves who'd never valued me. Just this, being loved, being chosen, being home. 9 days before my due date, I went into labor. It started subtly, a tightening in my lower back that I dismissed as normal pregnancy discomfort. But over the course of the afternoon, the tightening intensified, became regular, impossible to ignore. "Richard," I said calmly, interrupting a meeting he was conducting, "I think it's time." The meeting ended approximately 3 seconds later. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and effort and medical personnel. Dr. Torres was calm and efficient, guiding me through contractions, monitoring both me and the baby. Richard never left my side. He held my hand through every contraction, let me squeeze his fingers until I was sure I'd broken bones, whispered encouragement when I wanted to give up. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." And somehow, impossibly, I did. At 3:47 inches the morning, My son entered the world with a cry that echoed through the medical wing. "He's perfect," Dr. Torres announced, placing him on my chest. "Absolutely perfect." I looked down at the tiny, wriggling bundle of life. My son, mine, and Richard's, and felt my entire world reshape itself around him. He had dark hair like me, amber gold eyes like his father. And when he looked at me, I swear he knew me, recognized me as his mother. "Hello," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mama. And I've been waiting so long to meet you." Richard leaned over us both, his expression one of pure wonder. "He's beautiful, Kenna. He's absolutely beautiful." "What should we name him?" I asked softly, unable to look away from our son's face. "I was thinking." Richard hesitated. "If you agree, Valentine, it means from Hadria, which was known for its dark sand and bright water. Dark and light together. Like you and me. Like what we've built. Valentine." It was perfect. Valentine Werner, I tested. Future heir to the Northern Throne. Son of the Alpha King, and the Queen who was told she'd never amount to anything. And proved everyone wrong, Richard finished. Just like his mother. Epilogue. 1 year later. The morning sun spilled through the windows of our private chambers, painting everything in shades of gold and warmth. I woke to the sound of soft babbling from the nursery alcove. Valentine, awake and talking to himself in that nonsensical infant language that somehow made perfect sense to him. Richard was already up, I realized, hearing his low voice responding to our son's chatter. I rolled over carefully, my body still adjusting to the changes that had come in the past year, and watched them through the open doorway. Richard sat in the rocking chair with Valentine on his lap, 10 months old now, with his father's amber eyes and my dark hair, and a personality that was entirely his own. Curious, fearless, absolutely convinced that everything in the world existed solely for his entertainment. "And that's the Northern Territory," Richard was saying, showing Valentine a map like their son could possibly understand geography. "Someday, all of this will be yours to protect. But first, you have to learn to walk without falling on your face every 3 steps." Valentine grabbed at the map, crumpling it with enthusiastic baby hands, and laughed a sound that never failed to make my chest ache with love. "You're teaching him territorial politics before breakfast?" I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. Richard looked up, his face transforming with that smile he reserved just for me. Never too early to start his education. Besides, he's very interested. He's interested in eating the map. That too. He stood. Valentine balanced expertly on his hip, and crossed to the bed. "How are you feeling?" It was a question he asked every morning. Had asked every morning since Valentine's birth, because 3 months ago, I'd shifted for the first time in my life. Dr. Torres had been right. My wolf hadn't been broken, she'd been dormant, waiting for the right circumstances. And after Valentine's birth, with my mate beside me and my son safe, she'd finally emerged. Not dramatic. Not some explosive transformation that shook the palace. Just natural. Like slipping into water that had always been waiting for me. My wolf was smaller than most. Quieter. Not the powerful, dominant creature that marked an alpha or even a strong beta. But she was mine. Completely. Perfectly mine. And she was whole. "I feel good," I said honestly, reaching up to take Valentine, who immediately lunged for me with grabby hands and delighted squeals. "Better than good, actually. We're going for a run later," Richard said. "You, me, and our son in a carrier. Lyanna said she'd join us. She wants to see your wolf's progress." 6 months of learning to shift. 6 months of discovering what my wolf could do. She wasn't built for combat or dominance displays. But she was fast, agile, perfect for scouting and endurance running, and most importantly, she was real. Proof that everyone who'd called me broken had been catastrophically wrong. "A run sounds perfect," I said, settling Valentine on my lap. He immediately tried to climb my face, using my hair as leverage. "Valentine, no, we don't eat Mama's hair." He giggled and did it anyway, because at 10 months old, rules were merely suggestions. After breakfast, which Valentine spent mostly throwing food and laughing about it, I carried him to the council chambers where I was due for a meeting with the Education Reform Committee. Being queen had its challenges, but I'd found my niche, advocating for wolves like I'd been. The ones who didn't fit traditional molds. The quiet ones, the different ones, the ones who'd been told they weren't enough. I'd implemented new policies for identifying dormant wolves early, providing resources and support instead of judgment. I'd established programs for wolves from low-status families, ensuring they had access to education and opportunity regardless of bloodline. And I'd made it clear that in the Northern Territory, different would never again mean less than. The committee meeting went well, a mix of educators and pack representatives, all working together to design curricula that valued diversity of strength rather than just traditional power. Valentin sat in my lap the entire time, occasionally contributing babbling commentary that everyone politely pretended to consider. Afterward, Leanna found me in my office, reviewing proposals. "How's my nephew?" she asked, immediately scooping Valentin from my arms. He went willingly, having decided months ago that his aunt was his favorite person after his parents. Exhausting, delightful, currently teething, which means everything within reach goes in his mouth, including territorial maps, apparently, Richard told me. She settled into a chair, Valentin contentedly chewing on her necklace. "The education reforms are good, Kenna. You're making a real difference." "I'm trying. There are still packs that resist ones that think the old ways are better. There will always be resistance to change, but you're changing things anyway. That's what matters." She looked at me seriously. "You know you've exceeded every expectation, right? Every wolf who doubted you, every voice that said you weren't qualified, you've proven them all wrong. I had help, a lot of help. You had a partner who believed in you. But the work? The vision? The courage to stand up and say this needs to change? That was all you." She bounced Valentin gently. "And this one is going to grow up in a territory that's better because of his mother. That's legacy, Kenna." That afternoon, true to Richard's word, we went for a run. Shifting still felt strange, not painful, but unfamiliar in a way I suspected would take years to fully adjust to. My wolf form was sleek and dark, built for speed rather than power. Richard's wolf was massive by comparison, the Alpha King's beast, all power and presence, and barely restrained dominance. But he was gentle with me, matching my pace, never making me feel inadequate. Valentin rode in a specially designed carrier on Richard's back, giggling with delight as we ran through the forest surrounding the palace. Leanna joined us in her wolf form, golden and elegant, graceful in ways I could only aspire to, but she didn't make me feel less than. She ran beside me like an equal, occasionally bumping my shoulder in playful encouragement. We ran for an hour, and it was glorious. The wind in my fur, the earth beneath my paws, the sense of freedom that came from finally being complete. When we shifted back, me still self-conscious about the process, them treating it like the most natural thing in the world. Valentin was fast asleep in his carrier, worn out from the adventure. "You're getting stronger," Richard observed, brushing leaves from my hair. "Faster too. Did you feel it?" I did. I leaned into his touch. It's still strange though, being able to do this after a lifetime of believing I never would. Strange good or strange bad? Strange. Right. Like this is how it was always supposed to be. I just had to wait for the right time. He pulled me closer, careful not to wake Valentin. "I love you. Have I told you that today?" "Only 3 times. You're slipping." "Then let me make it 4. I love you. You, and that brilliant mind, and that fierce heart, and that wolf who waited a lifetime to emerge. All of you." I kissed him, there in the forest with our son sleeping against his back and the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. This man who'd seen me when I was invisible, who'd loved me when I was broken, who'd given me a home when I had nowhere to go. "I love you too," I whispered. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. That evening, after Valentin was bathed and fed and tucked into his crib, fighting sleep until the very last second, because he might miss something interesting, Richard and I sat in our chambers with the remains of dinner between us. "There's something I want to show you," he said, pulling out a leather-bound book I'd never seen before. "What is it?" "A journal. From my grandmother, the one whose necklace you wore at the gala." He handed it to me carefully. "I found it while going through old family documents. Thought you should read it. I opened the book to a random page, finding elegant handwriting that spoke of daily life in the palace. Observations about court politics, reflections on marriage and motherhood. But it was one entry, dated 50 years ago, that made my breath catch. They say I'm too soft to be queen, that my wolf is too gentle, my nature too kind, that I care too much about the common wolves, and not enough about status and power. But my mate sees differently. He says my gentleness is strength, that caring for those others dismiss is the mark of a true leader. Today, he told me I'm exactly the queen this territory needs. And for the first time, I believed him. I looked up at Richard, tears blurring my vision. She was like me. She was exactly like you. Gentle, kind, told she wasn't enough, and she became one of the most beloved queens in Northern Territory history. He took my hand. I didn't give you that necklace just because it was pretty, Kenna. I gave it to you because you reminded me of her, because I knew you'd understand what it meant to be underestimated and prove everyone wrong. Does everyone know this? About your grandmother? Some remember, but the story gets whitewashed over time. People forget she was ever doubted. They only remember her success. He squeezed my fingers. But you should know. Your son should know. That gentle strength runs in his family. That being kind isn't the same as being weak. I clutched the journal. This precious gift that connected me to a woman I'd never met, but somehow understood completely. Thank you, I whispered. For this. For everything. For seeing past what everyone else saw and finding something worth loving. Kenna. He pulled me close, and I felt Valentine stir in the next room, settling back into sleep. You were always worth loving. Some of us are just smart enough to recognize it. Later, in the quiet dark of our chambers with Richard asleep beside me and Valentine's soft breathing audible through the nursery alcove, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been standing in my childhood living room, my father's hand still burning across my cheek, believing I was worthless. Now I was Queen Kenna of the Northern Territory, mother to the heir, wife to a man who loved me exactly as I was, owner of a wolf who'd waited a lifetime to emerge. My family, my blood family, had been right about one thing. I'd never be like them. Never value bloodline over character, status over kindness, power over compassion. I'd never be the daughter they wanted. But I was the mother my son needed, the queen my territory deserved, the mate Richard had chosen, and that was more than enough. I slipped out of bed quietly, padding to the nursery alcove where Valentine slept. His tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. One fist curled near his face, his dark lashes fanned against his cheeks. You're going to have an amazing life, I whispered, brushing a finger across his soft hair. Your father is going to teach you to be strong and strategic and fair. Your aunt is going to teach you to be confident and fierce and unapologetic. And I'm going to teach you that being kind isn't weakness. That gentle strength is real strength. That who you are matters more than what others expect you to be. He stirred slightly, making a small noise before settling deeper into sleep. And someday, when you're older, I'll tell you about your grandmother, your father's grandmother, who was like me, who proved that you don't have to be loud or dominant or traditionally powerful to change the world. You just have to be brave enough to show up as yourself. I felt Richard's presence before I heard him, his arms coming around me from behind as we stood watching our son sleep. He's going to be remarkable, Richard murmured, just like his mother, just like both his parents, I corrected, and his aunt, and everyone who's going to love him and shape him and show him what it means to lead with wisdom instead of just power. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Choosing this life? Being thrust into the spotlight? Everything you've had to endure? I thought about it. Really thought about it. The judgment, the whispers, the assassination attempt that had left a scar on my shoulder and nearly cost me everything. The constant pressure of being queen when I still sometimes felt like that broken omega from nowhere. But I also thought about mornings waking up beside Richard, council meetings where my voice mattered, running through forests with my wolf finally free, holding my son and knowing he'd never, ever be told he wasn't enough. No, I said simply. I don't regret any of it. Because this us, Valentine, This life we've built, it's worth every struggle it took to get here. He kissed the side of my head, and we stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd been lonely in different ways, who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who'd built something real from broken pieces. Outside, the moon rose over the palace grounds full and bright, casting silver light through our windows. And inside, wrapped in my mate's arms with our son sleeping peacefully nearby, I finally felt what had eluded me my entire life. I belonged, not because of my bloodline or my wolf or my position, but because I'd chosen to fight for belonging. Because I'd decided I was worth the space I occupied. Because I'd survived everything meant to destroy me, and emerged stronger. I was Kenna Werner, Queen of the Northern Territory, mother, mate, survivor, and I was home. 3 years later, the day Valentin asked about the riddle was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. We were in the library, the massive palace library that had become my sanctuary, with Valentin sprawling on the floor surrounded by picture books. At 3.5, he was endlessly curious, asking why about everything. "Mama," he said, looking up from a book about wolves, "what's a promise?" I set down the report I'd been reviewing. "A promise is when you say you'll do something and you mean it. You don't break it. Like when Papa promises we'll go riding. Exactly like that. And you always keep promises. You should try to." Yes, promises are important. He thought about this with the gravity only a 3-year-old could muster. Then, "What's the bestest promise ever?" I smiled, thinking about a riddle I'd once used to buy time with a male I didn't know was a king. A riddle whose answer had become the foundation of everything we'd built. "The best promise," I said, pulling Valentin into my lap, "is the one you make with your heart. The promise to love someone no matter what. To choose them, every day, even when it's hard. Like you and Papa?" "Exactly like me and Papa." Richard appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by our conversation. "Are we telling stories?" "Mama was telling me about promises." Valentin wriggled free and ran to his father, who scooped him up effortlessly. "Was she? What kind of promises?" "The bestest ones. The heart ones." Richard's eyes met mine over our son's head, and I saw recognition there. Memory of that first night, when I'd asked him a riddle he'd refused to answer. When I'd thought he couldn't solve it, not knowing he'd understood all along. What is freely given costs nothing to make, but once broken can never be fully repaired. A promise. "Your mother is very wise about promises," Richard said, settling Valentin on his hip. "She taught me everything I know about keeping them. Will you teach me?" Valentin asked, his amber eyes so like his father's wide with interest. "Yes," Richard and I said simultaneously. And we would. We'd teach him about promises kept and the cost of breaking them. We'd show him, through our own relationship, what it meant to choose someone every day, to build a life on trust and love. And the simple, profound act of showing up. We'd teach him to be kind and strong, to value compassion over cruelty, to see worth in unexpected places, just like his grandmother, his father's grandmother, had taught through her example, just like I'd learned through surviving. Later that night, after Valentin was tucked into bed with his favorite stuffed wolf, and Richard and I were alone in our chambers, I found myself tracing the riddle carved into our headboard, the one we'd etched together on our wedding night. What is freely given costs nothing to make, but once broken can never be fully repaired. Below it, in Richard's elegant script, a promise. And below that, added on Valentin's first birthday. We promised to choose love, every day, always. "What are you thinking?" Richard asked, pulling me against his chest. "That I used to tell stories to escape my life, and now I live a story I never dared dream of." "Best story ever?" "Best story ever," I confirmed. "Even better than the books." He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You know what Valentin asked me today, when you were in your council meeting?" "What?" "He asked if Mama used to be sad, before she found us." Richard's arms tightened slightly. I told him yes, that you'd been very sad, but that you were brave and strong and fought until you found your happy ending. "And what did he say?" "He said he was glad you found us. Because now everyone is happy." Richard pressed a kiss to my temple. "From the mouths of babes. From the mouths of babes. Indeed." I thought about that girl. I'd been 23 years old, pregnant and abandoned, living in a shelter and wondering if surviving was even worth the effort. If I could go back and tell her what was waiting, I would say this: keep going, keep fighting, keep believing that somewhere, somehow, there's a place where being different isn't the same as being broken, where gentle strength is real strength, where you'll be chosen, loved, and valued exactly as you are. Keep going, because your son is waiting, your mate is searching, your wolf is sleeping, but she'll wake when it's time. Keep going, because your story doesn't end in that shelter, or that library, or even at that moment when you push a king out of the way of a crossbow bolt. It ends here, years later, in a palace that became a home, with a family you built from love instead of blood, with a wolf who finally emerged, with a life you fought for every single day. Keep going, because you're worth it. You always were. In the darkness of our chamber, I traced patterns on Richard's arm and listened to Valentin's soft breathing from the nursery. Outside, the night was quiet, peaceful. Tomorrow, there would be council meetings and political maneuvering, and the endless work of leading a territory. There would be challenges and setbacks, and moments when I'd still doubt myself. But tonight there was just this: the perfect, simple, extraordinary reality of being loved, of being home, of being enough. I love you, I whispered into the dark. I love you too, Richard replied. Every day, every moment, every promise kept, and in the morning, we'd wake up and do it all again. Choose each other. Choose love. Choose the life we'd built from broken pieces and impossible odds, because some promises, I'd learned, were meant to be kept forever. And this one, this promise between a broken Omega and an Alpha King who'd seen her worth, was the best one of all.